everybody, we're live now. Hello, welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education for Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020. I'd like to start off by reminding everybody with the audio-visual webcasting of the regular board meeting as per policy 1204, bylaws of the board. The regular meeting of the Board of Education will be recorded and may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board also reserves the right to edit or by motion of the board at any meeting, choose to not stream or archive a meeting or portion thereof. I would like to start off by calling the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. and begin by recognizing and acknowledging that the Langley School District is located on the traditional lands of the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Matsqui and Semiahmoo First Nations. I will just do some quick introductions and then I'll have a few announcements and we will get started. So I'd like to just introduce trustees present tonight. We have Trustee Marnie Wilson, Trustee Tony Ward, Trustee Rob Ross, Trustee Suzanne. I think somebody might be in a place that's really loud. If they could just be.
Oh, I'm sorry. It could be me because it's Murrayville.
No worries. If everybody could just mute just till it's their turn to talk, you'll just lower the general background noise. Thank you. I appreciate it. Trustee Suzanne Perot, Trustee Shelley Coburn, and we also have Vice Chair David Todd and myself, Chair Megan Dykeman. And our staff present tonight, we have Mr. Gord Stewart, Superintendent. We have our Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Brian Izili. We also have our Assistant Superintendent, Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent Mal Gill, Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chan, Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan, Communications Manager Joanne Abshire, Executive Assistant Judy Swanson, and we have our IT Technical Support, Paul Bebeau. And then we have also joining us this evening our guests, Director of Learning Support Services, Michael Morgan, District Principal, Ron Stair. We have Principal Kevin Reeve and Principal Kendra Samoto, and we have Principal Magdi Gabriel. And our partner groups this evening include from QP 1851 President Cheryl Barnum, QP 1260 President Raylene Shalak, Langley Principals and Vice Principals Association President Jeremy Linden. We have our LTA President Tanya Kerr, LTA Vice President Graham Esplin, and we have our DPAC President Alicia Rempel. And that concludes our list of attendees tonight. Thank you for joining us. So we are now just very quickly going to make a couple announcements. I'd like to just point out that today we as a board are recognizing Orange Shirt Day, September 30th. You will notice that all trustees and senior district staff are wearing orange shirts tonight in recognition and support of Orange Shirt Day, which is on September 30th, 2020. Wearing an orange shirt is meant first and foremost to honor those who survived residential school and the memory of those who did not return, while recognizing the harm done to all Indigenous people. It is an opportunity for the district to reaffirm our commitment to learning the truth and following the path of reconciliation. Orange Shirt Day is a legacy of the St. Joseph Mission Residential School from 1891 to 1881, or 1981, I apologize. Commemoration project and reunion events that took place in Williams Lake, British Columbia in May of 2013. At this event, former student Phyllis Webster told her story of her first day at residential school as a 6-year-old girl when her shiny new orange shirt brought by her grandmother was taken from her and never returned. When Phyllis's story was shared again at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission event in Vancouver in September of 2013, district and program staff requested that Orange Shirt Day be recognized across the district. This desire became a reality in September of 2014 as the Langley School District recognized Orange Shirt Day and made the commitment to the principle that every child matters. We also have one other announcement, and I would just like to quickly mention just before I go on to our T-shirts for Kindness campaign. Trustee Coburn reminded us that is very important that we acknowledge former Superintendent Emery Dosdale and thank him and recognize and take a moment of silence for the incredible work he did in public education. And he passed on August 20th, 2020. So thank you, Trustee Coburn, for that. And so moving on to our next campaign. We have the T-shirts for Kindness campaign running in our district right now in support of our district's food, or in support of the Food for Thought program. The foundation has launched this T-shirts for Kindness campaign. Due to the pandemic, the foundation has had to cancel all of its major fundraising events, where funds are raised to support many of their initiatives, including our district's Food for Thought program. Since April the 6th, the foundation has been providing $50 gift cards every week to up to 650 families across our district. That's $32,500 per week for 20 weeks, which has come to a total of $650,000, with additional commitment of $120,000 until the end of September. Many local businesses, associations, corporations, individuals, and schools have already purchased the T-shirts, but we are still hoping for more orders. So T-shirts can be ordered online in both adult and children's sizes. So please consider visiting the Langley School District Foundation webpage to support this initiative and our families, and these Choose Kindness T-shirts. So thank you. So we are now going to move on to a report from in camera. Vice Chair Todd. Vice Chair Todd, you just have to unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So in camera, we talked about personnel and property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Todd. All right. So with that, we now have on the agenda, or next on our agenda is the consent agenda. So could I please get a motion that the Board of Education adopts the consent agenda items as presented, moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Todd. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented? Any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. The motion is carried for the consent agenda. I just need to move this back around so I can have the chat at the side so I can see if there's anything in the chat. All right. So, sorry about that. We are now moving on to a consideration of the agenda. So we are looking for any additions, changes of order, or other. Trustee Ross?
Well, one thing that I would like to say is looking at how long our agenda is, I was thinking there should be something we could take off. My suggestion is trustee comments. Is there anything else we can take off?
Anything else that can come off? Okay. All right. So we have a suggestion. Trustee Todd.
Second.
Okay. So we have a mover for an amended agenda and a seconder. Any other changes? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting.
Can we speak on the motion? Or no?
It's a motion for agenda, so you can make suggestions of changes to the agenda, and then we would vote on the amended agenda because we don't actually have an agenda in place.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd like to add 2 motions under new business.
Okay, perfect. So 4 motions as per policy 1204. Items may be added to the agenda if each individual item is approved. So we do that under new business. So when we get to new business, we can consider each of your additions to the agenda under new business. They would have to be approved individually. So we'll get, for sure, add your items under new business to consider adding to the agenda. All right, so all those in favor of adopting the amended agenda? Okay, any opposed? Please state your opposition to the amended agenda. Okay, the agenda.
Opposed to removing trustee comments if that's the time that we're supposed to oppose that.
So we would be opposing an amended agenda. So an agenda has come forward with trustee Ross moving an agenda amended to remove trustee comments. Trustee Todd seconded that. The amended agenda is before the assembly. I have called for the vote on the amended agenda. All those in favor of the amended agenda?
Opposed.
Okay, any opposed? State your opposition. Okay, let me just, so we have, we have the agenda is adopted with trustee Ward, trustee Wilson, trustee Coburn opposed. So we are moving on with our amended agenda. So we are now going to superintendent's reports. So I will send the superintendent live here. First item is item 8.1, superintendent's report, education restart update. Over to you, superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Dykeman. So at this point, I'm going to try to do this as brief as we can, but there's so much information. Much of it we've had a chance with our district leadership team to share with all of you, but we haven't had that same opportunity with our public. I've certainly done my best through Joe Abshire, our communications manager, to give weekly updates to our parents in terms of being able to keep them informed, but certainly want to draw some highlights out as we're kind of into week 3 of during this pandemic. And I want to start off again by acknowledging the incredible work of all of our staff, the administrators, teachers, support staff, right on through. This has been an undertaking on a scale of nothing I could have ever imagined. And I am just absolutely amazed at how people have pulled together to do the best we can to meet these health and safety protocols that need to be put in place so our kids and staff can be safe, but also to try to do it in a way that kids and staff can feel welcome in their buildings. And you talk about, certainly a challenging time to do that. They've done wonderful work. So what I really wanted to do is take the opportunity tonight to speak a little bit in terms of some of the options that people have decided to pursue, and speak in terms of some of the rationales and structures around that. Also have an opportunity we've done a lot in health and safety, but our Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan will also again just reiterate some of the key things that have unfolded in the last couple of weeks. We'll have our Assistant Superintendents Woody Bradford and Mel Gill. They will speak a little bit to transportation, and certainly that continues to be a work in progress, and also in terms of the transition support models. And then I really am thrilled to have 3 of our building administrators share some of their stories, and also some of the things we've had to adapt to. We've said from day one, we're going to learn, and we're going to have to, this is certainly something that's going to evolve over time. I don't know, Woody, are you able to then put the PowerPoint up? Thanks, Woody. And we'll just move to that second slide with the kids there. Well, Woody's getting that in order there, just in terms of there you go. So that is something I tend to do at every single superintendent's meeting, and try to do that as much as I can through these meetings to always serve as that reminder of why we do what we do. And it's for these kids. You know what, and certainly we want to make sure that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they can, a number of them anxious, make sure that they can feel confident and safe and loved as they enter our buildings, and also get that focus back on learning, which is really in the last 5 to 6 months has been obviously a real challenge. And you know what, what's the number one comment I received back in these last couple of weeks is how kids were thrilled to see their peers. They were also thrilled to see staff, and how thrilled staff were to see each other and kids. And boy, that's, if anything's going to get us through this time, it's going to be reminding ourselves of these kinds of images going forward. So again, very appreciative of the work done to make sure we do the best for our kids. What has happened through, we've been given a mandate of the restart to try to get as many kids as we can back to school. And we've done, again, a marvelous work there. In fact, you have to think about in June, we were sitting somewhere around maybe 25 to 30% of students that were, willing to access those buildings, because obviously people were very nervous, and we're still learning a lot about the pandemic. So we weren't sure what to expect when we said, you know, for this opening week going into the orientation, really what could we look at for numbers? And amazingly, and again, I believe that it's again a tribute to our staffs that reached out to families in terms of so many phone calls. We could have just sent out an email and said, hey, we hope you come back, and left it at that. But Langley's better than that. And Langley, I'm always so pleased that our folks take that personal time, that touch, to connect with families and say, you know what, this is a tough time. Let us try to understand your unique dynamics and circumstances and what we can do to try to support you through that. And what are some things that we can learn from you in terms of what you need to see in place? With that in mind, we've been able to get approximately 90% of our students back to do face-to-face instruction, and 90 to 95%. And I put these are still percentages that will work out between now and the end of September. And I know that our Secretary Treasurer Brian Isley will be speaking a little bit in terms of enrollment also. But that's amazing. That is really impressive. You know, we have that many folks that say, hey, you know what, trust you, that you're going to set this up well for our kids, and we want to find a way to make that work. But we also understand there's incredible anxiety out there, and this took many forms. And another piece would say, people would say, hey, Gord, can we find some other model to support us? But what we were getting for feedback is many things. Some saying, I don't want to enter the building this year at all, no matter what you do. Quite frankly, I'm just not on. You had other people say, yeah, I don't want to enter the building yet, but I might be able to at some point. And I don't want to lose my seat in my school, because if I do come back, I want to be able to get back in there. We had some say, I'm ready to come back, but not full-time face-to-face. Maybe it's one afternoon, maybe two or three. So you can imagine trying to work this through. So that has taken some time, because we didn't have a model in terms of a transition support. I don't think anyone in the province did, quite frankly. And then also in terms of a distributed learning model, in terms of just completely online, our UConnect program at Simons has been designed to have kids attend a couple of days a week. Certainly from that grade 1 to grade 9, we didn't have something that was completely online. And so we had to determine how many numbers are we talking about, because what are we going to do about staffing that? If folks had the opportunity, rather than to do that, but to stay connected to their building and still do it online, but maybe take some baby steps back and maybe be able to return in January, would they rather do that? You don't knock that off in a day. That is something that takes an incredible amount of work. And I gave the analogy to our administrators. It's like, you know, you're building the plane while you're flying it. That's what we've been doing. That's stressful. And that is challenging. And you know what? I've been impressed and I've been very appreciative that many in our communities have been flexible and patient with us as we've done this, because it does take time. And right now we've been able to set up a transition support program that we have approximately in our elementary, within the elementary ranks, somewhere around 700 to 800 students doing that. And we have around another 200 to 250 that are looking at something like that at secondary. Both take a little bit of a different approach depending on middle or elementary versus secondary. And I'll certainly leave that to our assistant superintendents to speak to. But again, the design was, we hope we could put something in place that could still keep your place within that school. And though I'll be honest with you, it does remain a challenge there, given the incredible growth that's there, but it will still enable you to be able to through that connection, learn and perhaps be able to continue to stay connected. And maybe by January go, you know what, I am ready to go and I'd like to come back, which is fantastic. Paul Traddle and certainly in terms of the staff, over at UConnect, they've also done a real nice job in terms of saying, okay, if it's going to be a full-time DL model, let's make sure people clearly understand what they're signing on to here. And are they willing to make that commitment for the year? And if so, you know, making sure that we can help support them. And we've had around, you know, somewhere in the order of probably around 700 students look at that, and maybe around 3% of our overall population. And then we've had a very small percentage that have looked at with homeschooling. So for some families, that works out very well. But really, we've asked people to be cautious there, because again, other than providing resources to use, there are no other supports or connections to the school district. And we know for many families that can be very problematic. So just a little bit of the story behind the data there. You're going to be able to capture get some more information as we kind of go through the rest of this presentation. But I think if someone would have said at the outset, would I have predicted we would have had those kind of returns at face-to-face, given the challenges we've been under? I have to say I have been extremely surprised and pleasantly surprised at that, and that's a tribute to our staff. We have also had funding in terms of federal funding has come our way, and many of you may have heard about this. And the federal government has given to BC approximately $121 million, and that is split in half. Half that was provided right away, and another half that once you provide the documentation, we were hopeful that the province will receive the other half. And our share is going to come in around $7.5 million for that. So that has enabled us really to provide the staffing for this transition support model, because otherwise you can imagine we would have had to be collapsing classes and reconfiguring to make these things happen. And that would have been unbelievably stressful for families. And we've really tried not to do that, but you don't get funded to have a student in two places. So we have put in a great deal of that. We have postings out for over 30 staff. That's to help out with hospital homebound. That's to help out also in terms of additional staff to UConnect for DL, and also the transition support. So again, I'm going to give a few other examples of things that we can spend that money on, but you can imagine it that what sounds like a lot of money can go by pretty quick, especially when so much of it can go towards staffing. We're also looking at additional custodial to try to make sure we keep up these incredible high standards in terms of our schools. In terms of cleaning, it's amazing what you can actually also spend in terms of hand sanitizer. I'm shocked. I thought $250,000. I mean, my goodness, that's so much. You could never spend all of that. My goodness, we'll be going through that in a heartbeat. And so again, at least we have another place we can access for those fundings. We've been looking at also ventilation, masks. There's some of our families need help in terms of technology. We've been able to provide that. We're also looking at misters to provide folks, so that those could be there to provide hopefully more of a deep clean in terms of our hallways and areas. So these are just what I'm letting folks know, and I work with all of our partner groups who's trying to generate that list of the things that we can utilize. And we've actually also pushed for the ministry to say the more we can get that front end loaded, the more now at the beginning of the year, that would be incredibly helpful for us. So more to come on that, but at least again, this is certainly between the provincial funding and the federal funding, helping offset so many costs there, because you're looking at in our district, we could be over $10 million spent just in terms of providing infrastructure around the pandemic. And sadly, there won't be much to show for that a year later, because you think of how many things you'd love to put that money towards. But the reality is, in terms of trying to get our places to be, very safe and to meet those protocols and procedures around health and safety, these are the necessary steps and investments we have to take at this time. The other piece I'll just speak to again briefly, and in the news, you've already heard Surrey, unfortunately, has already had cases of COVID in their schools. My understanding is Abbotsford has also just had a case, Delta, few others, and this was going to happen. It would be unrealistic to say that we will not see any cases in schools whatsoever. It will happen. And I'm trying to let people know really where the provincial health officers are coming from is managing this. The good news is that kids have low transmission rates to each other. They typically get this from adults. They typically get it outside of schools rather than transmitting within. In fact, the cases that are out there right now, there's not been transmitted within. It's been something brought from outside. And the recovery rate for children who get this is again been extremely positive so far. So there are things there that certainly we want to do everything we can to make sure that there's physical distancing, absolutely, to make sure kids are washing their hands and again following all those procedures that we need to. But despite our best efforts, kids are still have the potential to contract this. And when they do, what takes place? And the key on here is communication. But you need to know that this is not directed by the school district. This is directed by Fraser Health in our case, so the public health officials. They're the ones that as soon as someone is tested positive, they let the school district know. However, the communication to families is dictated by them also. And if they determine that it is potentially infectious, then certainly in that cohort, so let's take a class, say at James Kennedy, if that was a case that someone in a class had it, they are not permitted to share the individual's name in terms of privacy information, but they make a determination to say, was that child in the school at a time that they were contagious? And if they believe they were, then they'll reach out to just the families in that cohort to say you do need to look for signs. Doesn't mean you have to stop coming to school. You stay in that same cohort. You may not contract it. You may have already, the person who's there is already out of the school. If they were going to pass it to you, would already have done so. So what they're going to really be looking at is for you to monitor any kind of symptoms to see if you have that. But again, they're very, whether that's something they deem the school needs to know, they only will do that if they believe that there is a risk to it getting outside that cohort. So I've had people ask, are they going to shut a classroom down? Are they going to shut a school down? Are they going to shut a school district down? Those are all the things that Fraser Health directs. What I've heard clearly from them, they'll be very reluctant to do so. They're going to do everything they can to contain it simply within that cohort and to try to keep the education system going and as a way as manageable as possible, and doing the best they can to communicate what steps people need to do to keep themselves in a safe place, or upon contracting it, steps they need to take. So, this was one that, again, as soon as we're ready to go with communication. It's also on a website out there right now through the Center of Disease Control that also lists those schools that, again, where this has taken place. But again, talking to the superintendent in Surrey, they have said that, as unfortunate as that is, the community has been well communicated with from public health, and and the system has kept going. And I think they're really trying to find a way to keep the system going, because they know, again, getting everyone back home, getting them back out of there again, you can imagine the challenge that could be. But angst, I get it. We have, again, students, we have staff, we have parents that continue to be anxious. We will do all we can to support those families and staff, and at the same time do our best to work with public health going forward. So those are my comments. I'm going to now turn it over to Barry Bunyan in terms of health and safety, and just with the trustees. Again, another 15 minutes of some comments, and then what I would be doing is you will have obviously lots of opportunities for questions once it's completed. So over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. Before I start, just like to acknowledge the incredible amount of work that's been undertaken at every one of our sites when we receive the provincial health and safety guidelines, which have gone through a number of changes over time as we work our way through this process. It's the responsibility of the administration and the joint health and safety committees at each one of our sites to take the information, review it for application to their school, adopt a plan, and post the plan for both staff and parents to see, which they have done. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of responsibilities, and on top of having to open up schools and do everything else that we're asking to do, they had quite a large list of health and safety guidelines to implement, many of which had not really been implemented before in the past, and I definitely want to give them congratulations on really a job amazingly well done. Also like to recognize the leadership of Meg Duke in our department. She's our manager of health and safety, who acts as a point person on a lot of this information and provides guidance and support to staff and information. Also Michelle Guillou, our director of HR, who runs a point on this and working with the unions and different things on implementing guidelines, and Megan Zazelenchuk, our manager of wellness, who works hard with people who have some different accommodation needs throughout this process. So there is a lot of information. I mean, the guideline from the K-12 health and safety booklet that comes from the ministry is 30 plus pages long, and then there's other guidelines that we work. Certainly didn't want to get into that detailed presentation. I thought I would simply focus on the things that are kind of new and implemented for this year. First of all, state we fully implemented everything in the guidelines, and in some cases have actually gone beyond what the ministry recommendations are for minimum health and safety cleaning and procedures. We've developed enhanced cleaning procedures in all of our schools, and a great comment to the to the power and support of our custodial staff and our manager working really hard to make sure that everything's in place. Again, a bit of a work in progress as we work through the first couple of weeks, but really getting to a good place. Protocols were developed around cohorts. Superintendent Stewart has mentioned repeatedly about how we've had to organize things around cohorts as that is used with Fraser Health if there is potentially outbreaks. 60 at elementary and middle, 120 at secondary. Our cleaning enhanced protocols are also developed around the cohort model as well. Each site, again, I mentioned before, has a joint health and safety committee that reviews and approves a site-specific plan. So all plans will have basic elements that are the same, but then they'll also add specifics for unique issues that go on in different buildings. Different buildings are different sizes and have different specialty rooms and labs and different things in it. As was mentioned by Superintendent Stewart, we have received funding first from the province and then from the federal government to help support us in staffing. In order to help with the cleaning needs, we have added 21.5 custodians to our current roster of custodians. That works out to about 860 hours per week of extra cleaning to support the protocols. We have also reorganized our custodial staff so that all of our schools, elementary right through to middle, secondary, all of them, all of our sites for that matter, have both day and evening custodians to help with the cleaning protocols. And we have developed through the leadership again of Meg Duke and Michelle Guillou, different training on health and safety protocols that's been developed and implemented for all staff. If you're a staff at a school, you receive this training at your school with your staff, with your principal. But we have also developed training that included all our TTOCs, our spares, any people we hired new to the district. There is a process of training that they've all gone through. Next slide. Perfect. In addition to all of the ways that we're ensuring that our buildings are clean and safe, there have been different ways that we actually flow traffic through buildings in order to maintain physical distancing as much as possible and to respect the cohort model. We've had a number of signs developed. This is only a small sample that went out to all of our schools. Thank you very much to the team that put that together, showing different ways that we show through traffic. The signs along the bottom, the ones that say one way only and have the footprints, those are adhesive. They go on the floor. It's very similar to what you see when you go out into banks and different places that do the same kind of process. And these are in our building so we can control the flow of traffic in the hallways. And also we do have signage that goes up on the main doors of the building, which is the only place where the public can enter, with a self-check, ensuring that anybody who enters the building doesn't have any symptoms. We have hand sanitizer stations at every entrance for people to sanitize, and we've installed plexiglass barriers at all reception areas as well. So a couple other things that we've implemented. Of course, hand washing is a key part of the safety protocols. In fact, it's been said over and over that washing your hands with soap and water, along with maintaining physical distance as much as possible, are two key parts to stop the spread of COVID. So we paid special attention to that. A lot of our classrooms already have sinks in them, especially at elementary schools, but many of our secondary, middle schools and some don't. So we have portables without sinks. We've installed 70 portable hand washing stations so that the portables do have hand washing facilities. In addition, we have installed or are installing up to 650 sanitizer stations for hand sanitizer. I think they've all been installed at this point. This is for the classrooms that don't have a sink. So wherever you are in our district, whatever room you're in and whatever building you're in, you either have a sink, a hand washing station, or a hand sanitizer station, in addition to the washrooms, in addition to the hand stations that are in the sanitizing stations in the hallway, etc. As you all know, there has been a big push on personal protective equipment. With the funds we received from the ministry, we have purchased well over 50,000 face masks, enough for 2 for every staff member, and also enough for 2 for every student. Staff members have been issued their face masks, and the extras have been stored at the school, and face masks for students are there when they're needed as well. Face shields have also been distributed to all sites and available upon request. Not everybody requests a shield, but if they do, they will receive one. And they have been distributed, so every school has a stock of shields. Plexiglass barriers have been placed in all school reception areas, and there are a few other areas that require plexiglass barriers as well. And we have a process internally in the district to determine when one is needed and when isn't. And we also have ordered 450, I think is safe to say, is the tip of the iceberg of the disinfectant wipes that we will probably be using over the year. But we've ordered those in order for rooms such as that have multiple purpose in them, rooms that will throughout the day have more than one cohort, libraries, music rooms, and multiple purpose rooms, and office areas, of course, which will have traffic in and out. Even though there'll be much fewer visitors than there has been in the past, but we've had disinfectant wipes to go, and we'll continue to supply those to schools as well. So that's a bit of a sampling of the different health and safety things that we've been working on. Of course, there was much more there I could say, but I just wanted to give you a sense of where some of the funds are going and some of the things that we've installed in order to support the enhanced cleaning. The final slide here is not to do with health and safety, but it is certainly to do with having to run our system with a cohort model. It was determined, as it was in most districts, that at the high school level, adopting what's called a quarter system, which has been used in the province in the past, but is not very common anymore, would be the best, because the quarter system then focuses on students only taking 2 courses at a time. And there'll be, 4 quarters throughout the year, so students will get their 8 courses as normal. They just do them 2 at a time. You could think about it as like a morning class, a lunch, and then an afternoon class. In order to do that, we had to reorganize. Now, this only applies to the high schools that have adopted the quarter system. Most of our high schools have. Some of our high schools haven't because they have unique situations that didn't require it. But when we do that, we did have to do some changes to our calendar for 2020-21 as a little bit different than what we adopted in the spring. We adopted a linear and a semester calendar, but we weren't anticipating a quarter system then. So we have done that. This calendar has been adopted. It is on our website. It has been distributed to schools, and it has been distributed to the community. The new quarter calendar, the Pro-D days are unchanged. There's still a common one in October, February, May. None of that's different. Of course, all the stat days and everything, none of those change. The only thing that changed is we had to move design and assessment report card prep days to coincide with the ends of Q1 and Q3 in order for them to have time to prepare report cards at the end of those quarters. We used a semester turnaround day, which is we commonly use between semesters as a time at the end of the second quarter, so that staff can use that to prepare report cards as well. So at the end of every quarter, there is an opportunity for teachers to meet and to work on report cards. And then the parent-teacher conference days, there's typically 4 of those in the year. They usually come twice, 2 at a time. Because there's 4 quarters, we redistributed the parent-teacher conference to have 1 in each quarter. They will probably take a different form than they've normally taken because of our protocols around having people in the school, etc. But there will be 1 in each quarter to give communication with parents on how their child is doing. Winter break, spring break, end of school year, the rest of that is all the same. So it's really just the design and assessment report card prep days and the parent-teacher conferences that got shifted to align with the 4 quarters in the system. I know you will not be able to read that sort of fuzzy calendar that's there, but it is on our website and it has been distributed. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Bunyan. It's an opportunity for me now to speak a little bit about the updates for transportation. And I just want to start by just reminding trustees and the public that the journey to make changes in our transportation policy started during the February 25th board meeting and was followed up by a March 6th presentation that went to, letter that went to the community. And again, just once again, just to let folks know that for our K to 7 and middle schools, our walk limits are 3.2 kilometers, and our secondary school walk limits are 4.8 kilometers. We have spent an enormous amount of time and effort trying to communicate the changes to our community, starting with those direct connections to those families who had utilized our transportation in the year prior, directly sending emails about the changes and directly sending emails about the steps that they needed to take in order to register for the following year. And we followed up those communications with information provided on the website, through social media, and through newsletters, a number of newsletters at each of our schools, to ensure that we did our best to communicate that things had certainly changed. Last check, as of Friday, we had 657 riders who have been accommodated. Those are eligible riders, ones that fit our policy. And if you think about the last year, we had 648 riders that were eligible. We've gone up a little bit in ridership as far as eligible riders are concerned, and we've been able to accommodate all of those students on our buses. But to be honest, transparent, the difficult process in ensuring that we could get all of our eligible riders on was further hampered by the fact that a number of our riders, over 100 of them, didn't get their application in on time. And as a result, obviously, because of our obligation to ensure that eligible riders had a seat on the bus, that slowed the process down for our courtesy riders. As far as the courtesy riders go, we continue to work as hard as we can to ensure that we meet our personal deadlines at the end of September to notify whether those families are going to receive transportation or not. We have communications ready to go for all of those folks. Some of the issues and concerns that we found, again, heard lots about COVID and the impact of COVID-19 in our schools. It also has impacted our transportation network as well, based on the fact that trying to make changes in our rosters in our schools are made very difficult by the fact that we have to have assigned seating on our buses, and you have to load from the back. So as you could appreciate, every time we add a student to a bus, it means redoing the assigned seating throughout the bus. So that has slowed the process down for sure, as well as the latecomers. But there are plans, now that the eligible riders are in, to continue the work that we had started in ensuring that we're working through the courtesy rider list as well. And we know, and we've had lots of communication with the community, that there is certainly a number of folks that are looking for transportation, and we will do our best to accommodate as many of those riders as possible. Certainly our commitment is to ensure that we don't have vacant seats, that we utilize all the seats that we can. Within reason, obviously, we need to keep some back for some latecomers as far as eligible riders are concerned. We're going to do our best to ensure that the resources that we have are utilized. And again, just want to reiterate as well that the number of buses that we could use from last year to this year, there's less of those, and therefore less drivers. And so we're trying to accommodate the requests based on limited resources as well. I'll just pass it over to Assistant Superintendent Bradford.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Gill. I just want to give people an update on the elementary middle transition model. First, before I speak specifically to the transition model that we've set up for elementary middle, and Assistant Superintendent Gill is going to talk about the secondary model, just want to give a huge thank you to all our levels in terms of the work that we've been doing to set a successful startup up under very difficult circumstances. Just the guidelines and processes that have gone in place have been incredible. The work of our leaders in our buildings and our staff to get the guidelines in place, and then the work of our parents and our students to come alongside of our schools and work collaboratively to make sure that these processes are in place, to go to schools and see the routines that have been set up to ensure safety is first and foremost for our students is exceptional, and our students are meeting every expectation we set for them. So a huge shout out to our kids in terms of what they're doing to work alongside our staff to ensure they remain safe and everyone in the building remains safe. As you know, as we set the elementary and middle model up, we were built in a cohort system, as Assistant Superintendent Bunyan talked about earlier. With the elementary middle model, we set up a 60 cohort, and that meant for elementary and middle really looking at entrance and exits to the building in terms of controlled startup and exits. We looked at recess time and lunch times or break times in terms of staggering those opportunities for kids to come in and out of the building, along with as we had staggered start times and staggered exit times. So a lot of the processes have been set up so that we have extra supervision in place so that students can move safely in and out of our building. Part of the model of setting up the cohort system was that we wanted to ensure that we provided a model for our families that weren't ready to come back to school yet, with the purpose of having an opportunity for their gradual return. And so what we've been able to accomplish over the last few weeks is, first of all, find out how many families are interested in this model. And at the elementary middle levels, we have 751 students who are participating in our transition model. And overall, we have 988 students from K to 12 in our transition model. For the elementary middle model, it's overseen by our district principal, Sam Maraka, and he's been working with our human resources department and our instructional services department to staff the transition model and also ensure that we have the professional development for the staff as they go into this new learning environment. As it's a new opportunity for our students to learn online and face-to-face with this gradual return, it's also an opportunity for our staff to learn alongside our students as we use platforms like Teams, My Blueprint to support them as they have a gradual return. So this week we started with our instructional services department rolling out a Ready to Learn week and working alongside our parents in the community, sharing incredible resources on our district website from K to 8 in 3 different areas, in literacy, numeracy, and social emotional learning. And the opportunity this week was just to get people back into the routine of learning alongside our staff, getting students ready to return to the online environment where they'd be greeted next Monday on September 28th with their classroom teacher. And that's the goal, is that next Monday we will have the online environment begin with our students and our teachers working collaboratively together to go through the 3 different areas of literacy, numeracy, and social emotional learning. The model is set up so that we have scheduled opportunities for families to come into our schools to work alongside their transition support model teachers to provide those supports necessary as they have the online learning happening within the mornings or different scheduled times throughout the day. The goal is, again, to just allow people the time and space to feel comfortable about coming back to our schools, and really also maintaining that connection with their home school. So as our transition support model teachers work, they will be spread out across our district and may not necessarily be placed in the same school as the students originally started in terms of their home school. So what we're trying to achieve as we enter the middle of October and end of October is to provide opportunities in home schools for scheduled visits for those students to come back and just maintain that connection and care that's so very, very important for our students, so that they know that they are still connected to their home school. And we'll be working through that over the next few weeks to ensure that our parents have the opportunity, if they feel they are ready, to schedule those appointments to come back to those home schools, along with having the opportunities for our transition support model teachers to provide scheduled appointments for them to meet if they need support in those academic areas that they're focusing on. So again, a huge shout out to our instructional services department and human resources department as we staffed and supported our teachers as they come online to try and ensure the model. And Sam Rock, our district principal, is working extremely hard to get this model up and running for our K to 8 transition support model students. Finally, K to 12 are diverse learners in terms of how we're supporting them. Many of our learners that receive extra supports have a resource team around them to support them, so that they are ensuring that they have the necessary supports to work through individual education plans that they have for each of them. Those supports will continue. So our resource teams will reach out to our transition support model students who have diverse needs to make sure that they are still connected to their homeschool resource teams. And we want to make sure that again, that connection is still there and those supports are still in there to help students along the different journeys in terms of their academic success and social success as they work through the transition support model. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Assistant Superintendent Gill to speak to the secondary model.
Thank you. With the secondary model, again, I think we've done a lot of thank yous, but it would be remiss if I didn't thank the administration of our secondary schools. I think I mentioned in past presentations that the work around the new model around the quarter system started sometime in the beginning of August. And so not lots of time off, but certainly the effort has been much appreciated, and it certainly has paid off with a fantastic model for students. And we appreciate the work and effort that's gone in. At the secondary level, we have 237 students who are currently registered in the transitions program. And again, that is supported in each of our schools. The secondary program is a little bit more fluid than the elementary middle model, only in the sense that with the grade 8s and 9s being in class full time, those students from the transition model are still registered in each of those classes that they normally would have had in their first quarter. The attempts that we're trying to do is we're trying to ensure that the connections remain. We want to ensure that the academic and curricular outcomes are still being provided by the classroom teacher, but the support for that, the work that's being provided is actually being done by a support teacher, kind of a case manager, who comes alongside the student in that transition model and provides them with the contact needed to ensure that they've got the supports in place so that they can continue on with their learning. All the while, obviously, doing our best to encourage that students are coming in and getting as much face-to-face as possible. Assistant Superintendent Bradford's already indicated that our diverse learners continue to be supported by their resource team, and we continue to ensure that those connections are in place. At the secondary level, of course, we have our hybrid model in the afternoon, so we've got half our students in for 4 days of the week. In addition to that, we have a straight online day that allows for our transition students to be connected through that Teams environment, and again, that Teams environment is encouraged through the whole process. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't move just to be able to acknowledge the work of the teachers who've gone the extra mile for the students, not just in the transitions program, but all of our students in the secondary world, by really acknowledging the fact that these students have come from a linear system where they've had courses every other day for an hour and 20 minutes, and then changed to a semester system at the end of last year. And then those teachers have acknowledged that change and then moved even further to a place where they've actually entered into the quarter system. And I think, again, providing that kind of a drastic change in a short period of time, the teaching staff has been amazing, working alongside of our IS department and our administrators. And in addition to that, our support staff that have walked that journey alongside with them. So we thank them for that great work that they're doing to ensure that students stay connected and continue to work through all of the work that they've been provided. I think at this point, just hearing from our principals in the field is actually probably the most exciting part. Enough of me, and I'd like to introduce Kendra Seminato, James Kennedy Elementary's principal, and she's just going to talk about her experiences. Kendra.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Gill. I am the proud principal of James Kennedy Elementary in Walnut Grove, and I just am hoping to share some of the pieces that we have learned and discovered in these last couple days with kids in the building. You know, to say that this September has been different from any other is certainly an understatement. We as a staff have been working hard to set the school up for a safe environment for kids to return. And you know, COVID-19 has presented us with many changes, and schools look different and they run differently during this time. You know, there's, as was mentioned before, there's markers on the floor for traffic flow. There's, you know, physical distancing markers, you know, bathroom signage. There's signage all over the building, our staggered recesses and our staggered lunches. And all of these pieces had to be put in place so that we were ready for kids to return. And I would say that, you know, in the last 7 days with kids in the building, the kids have done really well. They surprise us daily at how well they understand the systems and structures that exist. They understand that this is not just a situation that they have to experience, that we're all in this together and that we all have to do our part for the safety of everybody. So kids are adapting well. They're thriving in our buildings. And, you know, with these changes, I think one thing that has really, you know, been apparent to me in these last 7 days with staff and kids working together is how resilient and that educators really are, you know, creative problem solvers. They're willing to see any things that may pop up and find creative solutions. You know, the best laid plan on paper is only as good as what it looks like when we have kids in the building. And the kids have really been teaching us how to make our systems work better. And little things like hand washing, you know, in a kindergarten classroom with 20 little ones, washing hands multiple times a day, that's a system to learn with your kids for our teachers. And they've come up with really creative solutions for that, with spray bottles of water and hand washing while in the lineup and then rinsing. So these pieces are cleverly designed and being adapted and changed as the kids are in the building. So many thanks to our teachers and our support staff and our custodial staff and all of the people who are making these systems work, because it's truly a team effort. You know, health and safety is always our first priority in this situation. And I feel strongly that everyone's on board with making sure that it's the safest environment possible for our families, for our kids, and for our staff. And so, yes, there are a lot of changes. School looks different, but I would say, I think my biggest aha moment over the last 7 days with kids in the building and staff in the building is how much COVID hasn't changed things. You know, that first day of school when kids came running up to the building and were excited to see their teachers, and there was that joy on that first day of school was the same. COVID didn't change that. And kindergarten kids coming to their first day of school on the first day of their learning journey, and the parents watching from afar, you know, beaming with pride. I walk into kindergarten classes right now as they're doing their gradual entry, and I hear them singing "Bonjour, mes amis" with their teachers. You know, there's the magic that existed before COVID in these classrooms, and it still exists now. So what I've learned is, yes, we're exploring changes. Yes, we're facing challenges. Yes, we're working hard and we're facing a whole new normal. But I would say that because we're working together and because the kids are so resilient, that we're able to find the magic that was always there and regain our purpose of what we're doing in our schools. You know, we're building safe schools. We are making sure that we're never losing sight of creating community of care for our kids. We're going to meet our kids where they're at, and we're going to provide them with those amazing, engaging opportunities for learning so that they can still strive to their full potential. So I'm really thankful to all of our staff, all of our families for your grace and your understanding in this process, and to our kids, because I'm just blown away by what they've taught us in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Seminato. Appreciate your enthusiasm, and thank you for spending your evening sharing the story of James Kennedy. I'd now like to introduce Kevin Reeve, principal of Peter Ewart Middle School. Kevin.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, trustees. Thank you for allowing me to come on this evening and talk about our experiences at Peter Ewart Middle School. Many of the things I'd like to talk about, I'm going to reiterate what Mrs. Seminato said. It has been an absolute joy to come back to school, but I want to briefly share our thinking that brought us to this point. We needed to start off by recognizing that we had families in different places. For some, it was a necessity to return back to school to face-to-face instruction, and for others, the decision to go to our transition support model was the best decision for their family. So how could we create community with a variety of programs happening? And we started working with our staff around health and safety and to get that feeling of comfort and getting them ready to be back in the building. And there was some apprehension by staff, but for the most part, they were excited to come back to work. They were excited to get back into the building and work with our students. We needed to ensure that people felt safe, and we spent a lot of time co-creating and collaborating, like we've talked about, on every level with district staff. But on a school level, we worked incredibly closely with all of our staff members, QP 1260, QP 1851, the LTA, administration, district staff, everybody coming together to create protocols, create routines, and maintain consistency while keeping the spirit and the philosophy of middle school. The health and safety procedures have created a known part of our day, and that has really helped us build daily routine that people can hold on to and know that with all the different things happening in the world, and we hear different stories about different areas with increased cases, we know that we're doing our best to make sure that our staff and our students are in a great place to make sure that their health and safety is at the forefront of all of the decisions we make. And what we're pleased and proud about with our Restart Plan is the cooperation and support of our family, student, and our staff. We keep going back to all of the cooperation, and it is true. We've heard it from every level of the Langley School District. We are just so incredibly grateful and thankful to be working with staffs that are proactive, students that are excited to be back, families that I've made hundreds of phone calls in the past month. And I'd like to share a couple of stories, a couple of experiences with families, and this is by far the overwhelming majority. They are so incredibly thankful for our efforts. And we're experiencing school in a different way, and yet we're still providing many of the same opportunities, albeit they may look a little bit different. And health and safety is at the forefront. For example, we still have explorations where students get to experience woodwork, foods, art, drama, makerspace. Students still go outside for recess and lunch. They get to go out and play outside, albeit they are in zones of play in their cohorts. Our teachers still team with other teachers, and our students just stay in the same classroom for the majority of the time, and they stay in their cohorts, and teachers come in and visit, and we're making sure that we're physically distanced and we have masks. Advisory still takes place, and again, this happens in cohorts as opposed to multi-grade groups, but it's an opportunity for our students to build connections with the community, global community, and with a trusted adult in our building. I want to end by saying thank you for allowing us to come and share our experiences. It has just been an incredible restart, and yes, it's different, but to see the smiling faces and to see kids excited to be back at school, going into the cohort groups and being able to see their smiling faces, it is different. It's a different feel when I'm walking down the hallway doing supervision and we're all wearing masks, and it's hard to see those smiling faces, but you can see it in their eyes. But when we get to go into a classroom and see the great experiences and activities that they're doing, all based around our middle school philosophy, it's absolutely fantastic to see our staff working so incredibly hard with our families and students. There have been challenges of getting this all together, but I do believe we've pulled together not only as a school, but as a district to provide the best opportunities for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeve. Appreciate your commitment to kids and your commitment to your staff and the culture of your building. I'd like to introduce Mr. Gobriel, the principal of RE Mountain Secondary School.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Gill. I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of my colleagues as I was kind of preparing for tonight. And it's really interesting, actually, because we have had a ridiculous amount of collaboration just as we've been preparing to get this airplane off the ground. A ton of work, as Assistant Superintendent Gill said, to pivot and then pivot again from a linear to a semester system, and then from a semester system to a quarter system. And I really have to salute our district leadership team because in every step of the way, they have collaborated and connected with the principals of their schools. taken input from us, because we're so close to the ground on this, and have been so reflective and accepting of our feedback, so that we could do the best thing possible for our kids. Because at the end of the day, we want to make our schools as welcoming as we can for our kids, right? And that's been a challenge because of the protocols and the procedures that have been put around us, right? So some of the things that we've noticed. So again, so thank you to the DLT for the wonderful way in which they've included us in this process. Some of the things we've noticed is the amazing way in which students have been responding to this. So I'm going to probably echo quite a bit of what my two colleagues have said before me. The kids are just responding so well to all the protocols and the procedures that we put in front of them. And so are the staff, being at the doors every day, welcoming the students into the school, ensuring that, they clean their hands on the way in, ensuring they're in the right place and going in the right direction. Because we've got spaces in the schools where we want the kids to be in their cohort zones or in their classrooms, and they're going directly there and then into their classes. The bell schedule that we've set up so that there's a little more space in the school, right? The grade 9s have lunch before the grade 10, 11s, and 12s, and in that case, in our school, that means only 400 of the 1,600 students are having lunch in one session, and then 600 of the 1,600 are having in the other session. So there's quite a bit more space in the building as a result of that, to be able to maintain the physical distancing that we need to make the place safe. And in those times, the kids are just doing such a remarkable job of course, when they're eating, they need to demask so they can do that, and then when they're done, getting masked up again so that they're safe with their colleagues in the school. So just wonderful response from the students that we're finding. So some of the kind of maybe surprises, we found the quarter system quite interesting so far. While there's certainly been some challenges around the quarter system, we found some benefits, and specifically around only carrying 2 classes at a time. And there's certainly, we found some benefits around that, and we've noticed both teachers and students commenting about some of those benefits as well. But at the end of the day, and again, echoing my colleagues, I think the best thing that I've noticed is just kids engaged in their learning in school. At the end of the day, we might have masks on, we might have to be physically distant in some ways or things like that. But kids are in the class and they're learning from their teachers and they're learning from each other. And some other benefits that we've had around cohorting, for instance, is that our teachers of grade 8 students, or grade 9 students and grade 8 students in some of the other schools have a teacher that they can collaborate with in the afternoon. And so they have the same group of students, and so they're connecting about those students and teaming around those students. And it just creates that much more caring environment and collaboration around the content that they're working with as well. I'd like to finish by just reading an email from one of my teachers that she sent me just the other day. And she said, "Feel free to stop by my room anytime. They're in a truly lovely group who are already working hard and are amazingly optimistic. They're on board with learning and have been willing to try anything I've thrown at them. A true pleasure to teach." And this is a thing that we would hope to see from a teacher at any point in time when we're working in schools. But certainly during this challenging time, it's just great to know that the kids are still thriving regardless of the craziness around us. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and we look forward to working with your kids for the rest of the year.
Thanks, Magdi. And just for Chair Dykeman, turn it over to you. Just a couple of comments. One, I just wanted to Kendra, Kevin, and Magdi, again, thanks for taking the time this evening, but also for their outstanding leadership within this district and humanizing this experience we're going through. At times we're doing with platforms like this, and we're hearing about COVID statistics and all the minutia and detail of health and safety and all the rest has to go in. Let's not forget what it's really about. It's about working with our kids. It's about working with their families, and the stories they've shared tonight have done a nice job on that. And I know the presentation here, you think, wow, it's a lot of stuff. That is not even 10% of the work that's had to go into making this happen. And I guess if people wondered why, you're thinking, hey, it's only coming up to the end of September. Why are people exhausted? I think you got a good sense of why. So my appreciation again to the system, and appreciate trustees with your patience even tonight. It's a lot of information and for the public, but you needed to hear it. And you needed to see our commitment. And like I've said before, I wouldn't be anywhere else if I had to go through this. So over to you, Chair Dyke.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for such a thorough report. I do have a speakers list started. I'm going to start off though with the motion that's on the floor, and I'd like to remind trustees we do have a very large agenda, and in line with Robert's Rules of Order, each trustee can speak twice to the motion. So please keep that in mind as you put together which questions you're going to ask or comments you'd like to make. So with that, I'm going to start by asking for a mover that the Board of Education receives the superintendent's report on the education restart update for information as presented, moved by Trustee Perot, and that would be seconded by Trustee Todd. And if Trustee Perot, who is the mover, has no objection, I'm just going to go through the list that had come up in Teams as we went. So the first speaker who would like to have a question is Trustee Ross.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, staff. Fabulous, great work, and appreciate you guys so much. My question really is more for the Secretary Treasurer and maybe the Superintendent as well. It's we've hired new staff. We've got this money from the federal government. It sounds like it's one-time funding. Long term, next year's school district, when we're planning the budget for future years, where are we going to get the money to support that hiring of those teachers and staff in the long term?
Secretary Treasurer, are you okay with answering this, or should this go to the Superintendent?
No, I'm fine with that one.
Okay, I'll send you live.
Thank you, Trustee Ross. With the funding that we receive in a normal fiscal year, we wouldn't be able to do the stuff that we're doing right now. We are totally dependent on a lot of these measures from the provincial funds that have come earlier this summer, and the federal funds that came, a week or two before school started. So on an ongoing basis, with just normal operating funds, there's no way we could maintain the structures that we've built into to start up this school year.
All right, thank you, Secretary Treasurer. Trustee Perot, you're next on the speakers list. Are you okay with me sending you live now? Okay. All right, so you're off to live. All right, Trustee Perot, you're live now.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much, Trustee Dykeman. I have two questions. Thank you, everybody, for your presentation and your information and working so hard for our students. We're in such a critical time, and your steadfast leadership has been profound and much appreciated. I have two questions. One of them is regarding fire drills. Have we put thought in how fire drills are going to be looking upon exit and entry into schools? Regarding the doors, I recognize not all our districts in the province have navigated through that, and I don't recall hearing that in any of our reports. So I would want to know if we've looked at that and how we're going to mitigate having a copious amount of students and staff going through certain sets of doors all at once. And then the other one is, we've heard a lot about how well our students are doing. Do we have good check-in systems for our staff, and for those staff who might be needing by virtue of just their stress levels in the classroom, a timeout? Do we have a high five system to get them out of the classroom just to get a breath if they need, given the new transitions and the emotional load that they're carrying in the classrooms during this new transition time? Because it doesn't only affect our students, it also affects our staff, and want to be encouraged to know that we're looking at those things. And just quick comments, Kevin, I really love that you're talking about these opportunities for our students. It's so good to hear how the students are doing, and I love, Magni, that you shared that letter of encouragement from a teacher's perspective, it gives us some insight into their world, and that's really important because this is a very difficult time for everybody, and hearing those voices are critical. So I thank you guys for that.
Thank you, Trustee Pro. Superintendent, how would you like to direct the questions?
Assistant, yeah, so Chair Dykeman, that'll go to Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill.
Okay, oh, Mel Gill, okay. Assistant Superintendent, I'm just going to send you live if that's okay.
Yes, sure.
There we go. All right, go ahead, you're live.
Thank you. Trustee Pro, that's a great question about the fire drills. It's certainly something that's come up in our family of schools meetings, and the solution that we've come up with is that our fire drills are going to be controlled, which means that we're going to move kids through the process of the fire drill within their cohorts. Obviously, we can't have the whole school out at one time and have the fire drill kind of go all at one time as it would in a real emergency, but we want to ensure that students are well aware of the path that they need to take, the exits they should be taking, and then the procedures once they get outside of the building for those drills. And so we're just making sure that those are walked through, like I said, in each of those smaller sections or those smaller cohort control groups.
Okay, thank you. And as Assistant Superintendent Gill, would it be Assistant Superintendent Bunyan that would answer the second question, or are you comfortable answering the one about staff?
I think Assistant Superintendent Bunyan can answer the staff question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to send you live now.
Thank you, Trustee Perot, for the question. So I think the essence of your question, and please, correct me if I've missed something, is around making sure that our staff we check on our staff regularly. We ensure that their mental well-being and their emotional well-being is monitored and addressed if need be. It's an excellent question. As we know, all of this is very stressful on all sorts of different levels for everybody in our school community, staff, students, parents, everybody. Principals are very aware of this. Staff are very aware of it. We don't have an organized systemic model that we put in place, as opposed to the fact that principals and staff check upon each other daily. We have had conversations with our administration around if you're seeing signs of stress and anxiety or pressure or emotional states or any of those things that are causing concern. We do have ways of helping and supporting people. HR particularly through Megan Zazelenchuk and other members of our department work with staff with administration and with individuals to ensure that whatever supports are necessary are in place. So it is an ongoing issue. It is an ongoing process. And one of the things that Langley is particularly good at is flagging and identifying issues like that and contacting us for support.
Perfect. Thank you, Connie.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your questions, Trustee Pro. I'm going to now send Vice Chair Todd live. I'm just looking for him on my Vice Chair, is your camera on? You're supposed to be within the windows that I can see right now. Where did he go? Vice Chair Todd, are you still with us? No? Okay, I will come back in a moment. I do not see Vice Chair Todd showing on my windows right now. So I'm going to send Trustee Wilson live, if that's okay, Trustee Wilson, and then I will go back to Vice Chair Todd. Okay. So I'm going to send you live now. All right, there you go.
Great, thank you. So I'm not sure who my question should go to, but I'm just wondering about with all the extra use of technology that we are experiencing right now. I know that my son in grade 12 is doing a lot of stuff on Teams, even when he's in the class portion, just because there is part of it that's going to be distance when they switch over at the 5 weeks, and he only comes part of the time. So I guess what I'm asking is, I've heard a lot from support staff and SEAs that they have not had the accessibility to technology, and I know that they don't get assigned a laptop or an iPad the same way the teachers do. So is there anything in our planning or with the extra funding that came to be able to provide the support staff that are working with students with technology on a daily basis that they can just have access to without sanitizing and having it be part of just like a cart?
Superintendent, who would you like to have sent live for this reply?
No, and I think I'll take a stab at this one, and then so right now unfortunately the funding is targeted for students. So if we're going to provide technology, we're in a place that if families do not have accessibility to technology, as we did in the spring and certainly a little over summer session, then they can approach us so we can provide that for them. In terms of the staff themselves, I knew that we made certainly technology available, but to your point, Trustee Wilson, that was through resource rooms. So whether there's the availability to provide access to more of those, then that would be something I would have to follow up with in terms of our tech department. Right now, one of the complicators is we're still having to upgrade our technology for teachers. And you can imagine the scale of that investment is significant. But certainly that's a takeaway for me to see if there's something more we can do within those rooms for accessibility for SCAs.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Wilson, for the question, and thank you, Superintendent, for the note to follow up. I'm going to now send Vice Chair Todd live. I'm not sure, it sounds as though somebody might be wonderful. If you could just check the background noise. Okay. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I can't quite tell. I'm sending you live. There you go. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Okay. So first off, I want to acknowledge and say kudos to our staff, all of them in this system, for doing like just incredible work in short time and making some magic happen again. I mean, the stories we heard from the principals, and these are, they're amazing educators, and that's at the heart of every child's learning journey. So I really want to acknowledge and say thanks for doing all this work under very stressful times. They are stressful times, and I get it. I feel it. I can feel it in my friends, and I know it's out there. In your comments earlier, Superintendent Stewart, you talked about Fraser Health Authority and the terms, it's about management and containment. And I just kind of went, oh, management and containment. We will do our best. So we're not at prevention. There likely may be risks associated, but we're doing our very best to mitigate those risks. You've talked about, enhanced cleaning protocols. Can you tell me the money that we're spending on teachers, what does that work out to? How many extra teachers, and does it mean that class sizes on average have gone down in the district?
Superintendent, would you like me to send you live to reply to that question?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, just sending. Okay. You're muted.
There we go. We got it back on again. We're just playing with our mute buttons. So thank you, Trustee Todd, for your comments. And yeah, in terms of staffing right now, you're looking at approximately, I think, 35 to 37 teachers through the federal funding that we've been trying to add. That's Hospital Homebound, UConnect, and the transition support model. Our class size is down, yes, because again, we're doing our best to hold those spots in elementary schools while those students are out accessing the transition support time on the elementary side. We also have fewer international students in our schools, and yet we have not taken that funding back from schools. There's seats still available because of that. There are still folks that, as they're accessing the transition support, we're not, in terms of our secondary schools, again, we're not filling their spots because they're attending on some of them on a once a day or once a week kind of basis type of thing. So those are the other ones, and also the secondary going to 8 blocks. Certainly, if you can imagine, you had 7 science class of the 8. There's some reductions there, so we'll have a better idea of our class size totals within the next month. But they should be across the board significantly reduced. But it's still a work in progress, obviously.
Thank you, Superintendent. So what I have seen that we've exhausted our speakers list that I can see in relation to this report. Trustee Todd, did you have one more question? You are muted.
Yes, I had one more question. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you. So this is more a place of curiosity. And I'm dropping my daughter off at Walnut Grove and coming out again at the end of the day, and there's a large number of kids, and I'm just wondering about, do we have any idea about the compliance rate where kids aren't able to physical distance, like say the hallways and that, the compliance rate, like just a ballpark of wearing masks, like how many, you know, because I think Principal Gabriel, he kind of mentioned it a little bit, but is our compliance rate 80, 90%, or are the kids doing it? We don't necessarily have the mask police, but are kids doing it on their own?
Superintendent?
That one, Mel?
Mel?
I think Maggie Gabriel, Principal Maggie Gabriel is still available and could take that question.
Okay. All right, so let me just send you live. All right, you're live.
Yeah, you know what? I am, and my colleagues will concur with me, thrilled with the compliance of our students when they're in the hallways and in places where they can't physical distance. I think I would like to actually say it's close to 100%, Trustee Todd, when they're in the hallway. Some of the challenges that come up are just when they're having lunch, you know, and you know, because obviously they got to demask when they're having lunch, and so there's some, you know, some reminders around that time. Other than that, though, we have lots of students that just keep their masks on even during class, even though they're within their cohorts, and they're doing a remarkable job, and I'm certain you would hear that from every one of my colleagues.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I do not see any other speakers. So with that, we have a mover. I will just have myself live here. I'm just going to mute you, Trustee Vice Chair Todd. All right, so we have a mover and we have a seconder. And the motion that's before the board right now is that the Board of Education receives the superintendent's report on the education restart update for information as presented. As I said, that was moved and seconded. We are voting today in the negatory. So all those opposed to receiving the report for information? Any opposed? With that, the motion is carried. We're now on to item number 8.2. Summer session, and I'll just hand that to the superintendent to get us started, and we will go from there. So, Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Dykman. So on this one here, this is it's a good news story. Many places throughout the province did not offer summer session this year, and certainly once again, it looked different. But we certainly thought, you know what, we can still do this, and I'm very thrilled to have Ron Stair, a district principal of continuing education, with us here tonight. Ron has been associated with this program for quite some time and was really one of the architects of building it in terms of something that have up to 4,000 plus students accessing it in the last number of years. And appreciate his leadership, and I know he worked alongside Kathy Gracie, Kim Anderson, and others to really put this together. So asked him tonight just to give a synopsis of what we saw. So thanks again to Ron, and Ron, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Gord, and thank you, trustees, for this opportunity to share with you. And as Gord said, been involved with this a number of years, but obviously this was a very different summer session for all of us. We can go to the first slide, Woody, if you could, please. And like all the other programs across the province, across the district, we had to make a lot of adjustments due to COVID-19. And we were obviously unable to offer the same breadth of programs. We had to pivot, and we really made it's interesting, we talk about a growth mindset. Instead of focusing on what we couldn't do as a district, we really focus on what we could do during these times to bring the most benefits to Langley. And I really firmly believe in giving credit where credit's due. So there's various points throughout this presentation where I'll highlight a few people in particular. But really, to start this all off, it really was Superintendent Stewart and Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill, Mal's who I report to directly, who oversees the summer programs. Really, in working with the two of them, they were really asking us as administrators that oversee the summer program to do what we could to maximize our opportunities. We obviously had to make sure that people were following the guidelines during COVID, that people felt safe, both emotionally and physically. But in a positive way, they really were trying to encourage us to do whatever we could in the midst of all the uncertainty. And if you think back to the times at the end of last year, things were in flux. We had no idea what to expect from summer or what stage we would be at. And both of them really said, like, we need to do what we can to help students because so many students have been out of school, have been disconnected. So that's really where it started from. And then we took that and ran with it. Superintendent Stewart had already mentioned people like Kathy Gracie and Kim Anderson, who I work really closely with to focus on the needs of the elementary and middle program. And then Jeremy Linden and Carla Clapton and I, we worked together on having to rebuild a whole summer program for the secondary side of things. And then really from there, though, I mean, that was the starting point. It really did take everybody from there on, the administrators who offered to work during summer. And it's been touched on before, but really throughout the district, people were extremely tired and worn out from having worked from March to June. But still, a number of people stepped forward and said, "No, this is important. I'm going to carry on." It was, you know, it's obviously voluntary; they get paid, but they don't have to do this work. But so many people were committed at the admin level, and then also the teachers, again, who didn't have to do this work but wanted to make sure they're helping students at the elementary side and secondary side. A lot of them had to do things differently, and then also all the support staff, the SEAs, the clerical that came in. So this is really one year where everybody had to be fully on board, and they were. So at the elementary side, on the slide you have in front of you here, we had a chance to have 421 students, but of those 421, we really had to focus on what we could do. We couldn't have the same breadth of over 2,500 students we had in other years. So we focused as a district on the literacy for primary students, including some ELL learners. And really that goes back to some of our original roots as a summer program, where we were focusing on literacy because we know that literacy in the primary grades in particular is an indicator of long-term success for students. So really thankful for what we were able to do there. We had to limit class sizes due to the restrictions in place, but it also allowed us as a staff at the elementary level to really focus their efforts. We also shifted our registration model to being a referral system coming from the schools rather than an open registration system. And that really allowed schools to encourage the students that they thought would benefit the most from literacy focus. And I will say, I think Langley should take great pride in all those people that I mentioned that did this, that make this happen. We were the only district in the region to offer in-person learning for this age group. No other districts took this on. And part of that is we held off as long as we could to make sure we were going to meet the guidelines. And again, that came from working with Mal and Gord to try and see what we could do to make this happen. So really thankful for what we were able to do there. And just finally with the elementary side, so we did have 421 students at 5 locations. And, you know, spoiler alert, summer session was a success based on that compared to, like I said, it's not about the numbers, it's about what we're able to do in the middle of COVID. So those 30 teachers, the 40 SEAs for those programs, the 5 administrators, they really made it happen. And also we still followed that model that we have as a district to make sure that we were geographically accessible across the region. So we didn't just target certain areas, we made sure right from Aldergrove, Brookswood, all those areas into Central Langley, up into the Slope area that we had programs in all those areas. And I would be remiss before we get past this point, Kathy Gracie and I have worked together for a number of years. Kathy's indicated that she was going to step back from summer next year. And it's been great working with Kathy these last number of years because we both have a similar vision. We both approach things differently, but that's what makes us a good team. So I just want to acknowledge all of her hard work to oversee the elementary and middle program. And she and I working together, I think, have been a good tag team. So I'm looking forward to whoever steps into that role. So, but thank you, Kathy, for all your hard work there. I will say that it was extremely positive feedback, both from staff and students. And I think a lot of that had to do with, if you think back at the end of last school year, so many students had been disconnected from schools. And these literacy students, primary students in particular, were able to come in and get individualized help and feel confident and ready for the start of September, when a lot of them had been disconnected and were struggling with some of their basic literacy skills. So we're very thankful for that work and also the positive outcome we had with those students. So on the secondary side, as I touched on, we had to focus on less than before, but we did decide to focus on our core academics, grade 10 to 12. And with that, we moved to a different model because we couldn't offer the full face-to-face model due to the COVID restrictions in place over the summer. So we rebranded it slightly. We called it Blended Summer Learning. And obviously the blend was a mix of Moodle for the content for the students. And also just acknowledge the number of teachers that had to get up to speed quickly on Moodle. It gave us a baseline of completing a whole course in a short period of time rather than having those teachers have to start from scratch to complete a whole course. So thank you for all those teachers who took that on and helped their students. Obviously, most people were already familiar with Teams, but we also uniquely offered the opportunity for our students to come to RE Mountain for in-person support. So that's where the blend came from. So it was summer session, but we actually funded it through our distributed learning school. And that was strategic, partly because what that meant is then students who were not able to keep up with the pace of summer programs are now able to carry on at LEC for the rest of the year and finish up their courses. And the good news in a positive way is we only had about 20 students who were not successful of the large number of students that we're going to talk about just in a second. So 819 registered students, some did withdraw, but the bulk of them were successful in completing their courses. And only about 20 students actually decided that they couldn't keep up with the pace and they moved over to LEC to finish. So I think that's an incredible testament to the administrative team, but also the teachers and support staff. So 48 teachers, the 2 administrators that I already touched on, Carla Clapton and Jeremy Linden. And again, they had to rebuild things on the fly, like we've already talked about multiple times. And we rebuilt summer session and made it a success. And that was all because of their work. So thank you for that. So the other thing that we had still was a smaller version of our Youth at Risk program. We had fewer sites able to offer this year, but Walnut Grove went ahead with theirs and were able to do it in a way that kept the distance required at that time with 2 teachers and 48 students. And HD Stafford ran a program at the end of August to help students transitioning from their neighboring schools coming into Stafford. And again, at that site, they had 2 teachers and 2 SEAs. And again, it could be disappointing compared to other years because at other years we had more programs, but so many people just did what they could, and just these were the sites that were able to pull it off, and others ones they came up with alternate ways to help their students transition as we got ready for September. Next bullet, please. I do want to acknowledge too, because I said at the beginning that I just think it's really important to acknowledge the work of everybody. And in particular, just to single out the 4 LEC office staff that worked directly with me. They did double duty while shorthanded because with COVID, we were shorthanded partly because of one of our teachers who retired, or not teachers, sorry, clerical who retired. But also it was just with the shortages of people available for clerical subs. So these 4 ladies, actually all of the registrations, so I think when I total it up, they helped all of the students, so about 1,455 students when you count LEC's spring session and all the summer registrations. So those 4 people made summer session happen and made it so the administrators, the teachers, and the other support staff could actually work with those students. So I just think that's just a testament for all the hard work that's gone in there. And finally, looking ahead to summer session 2021, obviously it will depend a lot on where we're at with COVID moving ahead. We did learn some things from this year, so if we're at a similar stage, I know there's some things we would do differently next year. I think as we move through this year as well, as my colleagues have already reported at the elementary and middle years and secondary, we'll have a different baseline to work from. We hope to be able to return to a broader range of programs and offer programs to up to 4,000 students across 11 sites or 13 sites or more, but we'll do what we have to, just like we did this year. And the final bullet there is just at secondary. We've talked in the past about sometimes some things that you try one year, you realize this is something that could continue. And we recognize that other districts have done this before. So I could see us in the Langley School District continuing to offer a blended summer learning opportunity, which allows students to have a mix of remote and face-to-face alongside the traditional in-person learning. And a lot of districts have had great success with that. It just gives more opportunities for our students. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I'm glad to answer any questions and go from there.
All right. So with that, Superintendent, did you have anything to add?
No, I just again echoing what Ron has said. It was a tremendous effort given the circumstances we're under. I appreciate this report tonight, and I know it's sad because I feel like we're trying to squeeze and rush so many things in, but it's been there's so much that's happened in the last number of months. So I'm feeling badly about that part, but it's a great story, and once again appreciate the work on our staff on it. So yeah, obviously Ron's available, or myself, for any questions.
All right, thank you, Superintendent. I do have one speaker for a question, so let's start off by getting a motion on the floor. And the motion is that the Board of Education receives the report on summer session 2020 for information as presented. Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Perot. First speaker tonight is Trustee Todd. So let me just find where he is. Trustee Todd, is your camera on? There you are. I'm going to send you live now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Trustee Todd. We can hear you. Oh, now we can't. You're muted again.
I promise this wasn't going to happen. Okay. Once again, thank you. And it's just an indicator of what else is going on. But I think it was really important on so many levels to continue to offer summer school, and the tremendous progress that we had experienced from the past. Like, it was becoming just a fantastic thing. We didn't have to worry about year-round schooling because in effect we were doing it with our summer school. And I'm glad that you found a way to make it work in these extraordinary times, and everybody that was willing to do this, I mean, I can only imagine apprehension felt by those people, and the fact that you were able to salvage and do not just a great job, but the continuity of our summer session program. I also like what you said, and maybe you can expand a little bit more about how the blended learning was, you know, a thing that you started with, and now it's something you want to continue.
Sure, I'm glad to speak to that. I have the privilege of being connected across the metro region in particular, where there's a lot of summer programs happening. So we've got a really good collegial group of people that get together and share best practices across the region. So Coquitlam in particular has had great success offering a blended opportunity where they offer twice a week face-to-face opportunities for students, and then the students do a blended option online using Moodle through their distributed learning school. And based on their success and some of the things that they shared with us, again, very collegial, sharing ideas, I could definitely see it, that it could be something where we could offer in the future, even if we go back to a full 5-day-a-week face-to-face summer opportunity. And the benefits to our students is it gives them a bit broader range of opportunities, but it also, if they weren't able to attend 5 days a week for some reason, they could still attend twice a week and do the Moodle course. And especially after this year, this year and the end of last year, where more and more students are getting comfortable with the digital technology, I think we've increased our rate of success with that type of technology because of the comfort level.
All right, thank you very much. My next speaker on the list is Trustee Perot. Trustee Perot, are you there? Wonderful, I see you. I'm just going to send you live now.
Thank you so much. I just, Ron, want to thank you. I have no questions. I just want to thank you for the tremendous work you do at your school always, and with the summer session programs as well, especially through COVID. I know there's many of us parents in the district who are looking at our schedules in our post-secondary cohorts, and with the quarter system that we've entered into, your school is catching a lot of us and helping us meet our grad plans and succeed through that with minimal stress. And so I want to acknowledge that piece as well, because that has been really important as we're navigating these pieces, and you just continue to lead that school with such integrity and honor for our students, both our young adults and our older adults. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Trustee Perot. Go ahead. All right, anybody else on the speakers list? I do not see anyone else on the speakers list. I'll send my, okay, I'm live here. So with that, we do have a mover and we have a seconder on this motion. So once again, we're voting in the negatory. So all those in favor of receiving the report for information. Anybody opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. Seeing none, the motion is carried. We're now on to item 8.3, board policies and district administrative procedures. I'm going to send Superintendent Bert Stewart. I'm going to mute or ask anybody who can to please mute themselves while the superintendent is talking, just because there's a lot of background noise right now.
Thanks to Chair Dykeman. And so what I'm just going to do is provide a bit of context for the public who are listening in tonight to kind of wonder what the heck is when we talk about board policy admin procedures, why is it on the agenda and what's been going on here. So this really stems from a motion that came out in February 26th, where trustees decided to take on the daunting task of reviewing our board policy and admin procedures and utilizing the services of Leroy Sloan. I have to commend all the trustees for taking part in this, because this is something many would avoid.
Make a point of order, Chair, a point of privilege. I believe that motion came out of in camera, and I looked through my minutes quickly while we were just here, and I can't find where we voted to pull it from in camera. So I might have missed it though, but I just want to be sure that we're, not getting ourselves in any trouble or jeopardizing ourselves. So if we could just be sure, be clear that there was a motion to pull it from in camera before we discuss it further. Thanks. Sorry, was I muted?
Trustee Dykeman, you're muted. Trustee Wilson, you were not.
Okay, so go ahead, Superintendent.
I'm not sure where you want me to go with it. I'm just trying to set up the context, so I'll leave you folks to give me some guidance there.
So the board did discuss the getting the services of the policy at December the 3rd, 2018 is when we started that. We discussed it actually at a policy meeting. That's where it started. We then also discussed it at subsequent other meetings, which one was in camera, but we also discussed it at finance and facilities and other meetings. And so the process did start actually out of in camera, but continued with in camera. It was December the 3rd, 2018. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Okay, yeah, so the context is just that it needed to be done, and it's a daunting task, obviously, and one that many, you're going to be honest with you, many trustees avoid, because you can imagine the amount of work it takes to go through an incredible amount of documentation. For our public, again, what board policy, again, described to me by Leroy, who has far more expertise in this than I do, is he describes it as the trustee playbook. The board playbook, it's the work that the board does, and the administrative procedures is a superintendent playbook. That's the kind of the work that I do with my staff. They were dated. Some of these things have gone back 20 to 30 years that have not been revised. It leaves the organization vulnerable, and certainly something we needed to take on. Trustees, so the public are aware, have sat through a number of different sessions in the last year and a half to work through these. And basically, to this point, I really do have to thank Judy Swanson. She is the executive admin assistant for Brian Isley, and boy, she's put an incredible amount of work in terms of revisions, because you can imagine how many had to be done. So what it is we're looking at in terms of, and it goes to our trustees to this point, is at some point, we do need to bring these to our public so that we can get some feedback from them. And my understanding is you try to give at least a couple of meetings. So we'd be looking at a November date board meeting, if it was decided today to proceed, for them to provide feedback on what we've come up with so far. What happens after that point, we take that feedback in from the public, and if we still need to make any adjustments, we do. The reality is these will continue to evolve no matter where we land. We do have two platforms available going forward. We have for our public, we have some people that have all kinds of interest in this that can come to public board meetings when we finally get back there, or put it through feedback to say, I have questions around policies and admin procedures. And we also have for trustees available policy committee that you can continue to revise these. I'm putting that out more for the public so they think, oh, once these are done, that's it. They can never be touched again. That's just not the case. They can absolutely be reviewed and should be reviewed on an ongoing basis. What we would be looking at as a staff is really tonight is getting a determination from you to determine at this point, are you ready to go to the public in terms of having them provide their feedback or not? So that's not meant to, in terms of, certainly trustees can weigh in with their thoughts on that. We leave it to you as staff. Our only involvement now is simply getting direction from you. Either we're proceeding, getting the feedback moving on, or not proceeding, in which case tell us what we need to do with respect to this in terms of the recommendation. So I'm going to actually ask if if there's any other in terms of questions from anyone, but I really wanted to really turn to Brian to see if he had anything that I've missed in terms of this particular matter before we turn it back to our board chair.
Secretary Treasurer, do you have anything to add before I get the first motion on the floor?
Just to add on to what the superintendent had mentioned on the ongoing process, part of the board policy for the policy committee is for them to review all board policies throughout the term. So the intent is that these things are looked at an ongoing. It is actually part of the policy that they have to be looked at as an ongoing concern. And with the structure that we have with the split between the board and the superintendent's playbooks as they were so defined, it does allow board the ability to change things quicker too as well, to adapt to changes that staff need to do so as well. And they will be brought back as information items to the board for any of those kind of things. So like the superintendent said, these are a starting point, and they will always have a review process and ways to adjust these as we go forward.
All right, thank you. So we're going to start by getting the first motion moved and seconded, and then I do have a speakers list. So the first motion is that the Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to rescind all current board policies, regulations, and administrative procedures effective November 17th, 2020. Could I please get a mover? Moved. We would need a mover for that. Last call for a mover. Okay, I've got moved by Trustee Ross. Could I get a seconder, please? Need a seconder. Calling once for a seconder. Calling twice for a seconder. Anybody going to second this? Trustee Todd, is that you?
Yes, I can't get in. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Would you like to second the motion that we have on the floor?
Yes, but just point of order,
yes.
Chair, and please to indulge, just to make sure this is legal. If there's any possibility that this was in camera and that, I want to make sure going forward that we've removed it from in camera. So perhaps
I can actually provide some context for that. So the motion, we started the discussion to review the policies. It came through in a policy meeting. Then we went from there and we spoke about who would provide the policy leadership. Once we agreed and voted to proceed to go ahead with the policy leadership, that brought it out because we set up a series of sessions. Those sessions were not in camera. That was the agreement, and that is legal. So okay, it would be within order. Okay, so that was Trustee Todd had a point of order, and then my first speaker to the motion, which is now moved and seconded, would be Trustee Coburn. We can't hear you, Trustee Coburn. I'm sorry.
I'm not too interested in speaking to the motion right yet. I want to go back to the point of order because, again, and through the chair to the superintendent, or to the secretary treasurer, do we have to vote it out with that wording with a proper motion for it to be legal? And if that can't be answered tonight, we should probably get a proper answer on that to make sure that it's legal. Because saying that, oh, it went here and it went there, isn't really getting to Trustee Wilson's point. And I think before we go further in the conversation, we should allow the other trustees who wanted to comment on this before the motion was dropped to have their opportunity to comment.
Secretary Treasurer, would you like to speak to that?
To be honest, that is not something that I have an answer to. I would have to do some further research on that.
Would you like to move this item then to the November meeting?
We can move it to the October meeting.
October meeting, sorry. Okay. That will move the 3 motions 8.3 to the October meeting, so you can receive clarification on that. And we will go back to our next item, which is naming the Southwest Yorkson Elementary School. So I will hand that over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Dakeman. Good news story is we've got another elementary school that we're going to open in September. I really hope we do, or that's going to be extremely problematic for us. And so just as we went recently through the Peter Ewart naming process, we're now looking at doing this for Southwest Yorkson Elementary School. So really at this point, we're hoping to be able to start the process should trustees be willing to put that forward tonight. And what that involves is our communications manager, Joe Abshire, will then make sure we get out to the public through media and letting people know that they can get their recommendations into us in terms of what they would like to see. And then obviously trustees vet those. And then we work towards, I believe, we're trying to work towards a December public board meeting that we would be able to announce this moving forward. So again, before I turn that on over, I'll just again ask our Secretary Treasurer Brian Isley if I've missed anything with respect to that. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to trustees to see about getting this process started.
No, there's nothing further.
Okay, so I will get a motion on the floor, and the motion which would be on the floor is for the Board of Education request that superintendent commence the process for naming the future Southwest Yorkson Elementary School as per policy 4004, naming of schools. Could I please get a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Perot. Any comments or questions on this? It's a good news story. It's exciting anytime we go out with the naming of a future school, and I look forward to seeing the name submissions that come forward. So with no speakers on the list, we will be once again voting in the negatory. So all those in opposition, please state your opposition in the chat. Seeing no opposition, the motion's carried. We're now on to items 9.1, which would be the enrolling report update, which is the Secretary Treasurer's item, and I'm going to send it to Secretary Treasurer live.
Thank you, Chair Dakeman. I wanted to provide an update on where we are at with our student enrollment. This is something that we normally do at the September meeting. But there, as with most things with COVID, are a couple of caveats with the normal later start to school, which was already planned, and the fact that COVID further delayed some of that start. We only really have a couple days of children in school to get these numbers, and with parents still figuring out which of the program offerings that they're looking at in the district. These numbers are very preliminary and could change a fair bit yet, but wanted to give the trustees and the public an idea of where we are at least a very high level, and some things that we've noticed so far in the enrollment. So historically, we've broken it down by the middle school stream and the 8 to 12 school stream. You can see that for the middle stream, we're up about 42 students. These are all head count numbers. They would include people that are choosing the transition program, wouldn't include students that are on homeschools and those kind of choices. You can see that our K-5 schools are down a fair bit from projection. A lot of that is in our Nickel Park side, a little bit at Blacklock. The Willoughby schools, most of them are down from projection, other than RC Garnet, which is up a little bit from projection. All the middle schools are up except for Stafford. Our secondary schools at 9 to 12 are up. That's split mainly between LSS and RE Mountain. For the 8 to 12 stream, you can see that the elementary schools are down. Most of those are in the Poppy and Walnut Grove areas, with a little bit in the Brookswood area. And our high schools are up mainly at Brookswood and Walnut Grove. It's evenly split there. So we're showing increases at Vanguard, and our other alternate programs are fairly in line. So right now we're looking to be about 15 students up, like I said, from projections, but it is still very early, and especially at the secondary level, they were still going through which students had and hadn't arrived or would be attending. One thing that we definitely have seen, you can see on the second slide there, is the home school students. Normally for us, we're in the 15 to 20 student range for homeschool. This year, that number is about 130, so that has drastically increased of the number of families that have chosen that homeschool option. But so we won't be able to fully know where we're at until we sort out some of the DL and the choice programs that are being offered with the COVID. So that'll be all done by September 30th, which is a very important date for the district, as that dictates the final numbers, which dictates our funding, which we will be finding out our final funding based on these numbers from the ministry in December. So with that, Chair, I will answer any questions.
All right, thank you. So we will get a motion on the floor that the Board of Education receives the enrollment report update for information as presented. Could I please get a mover? Moved by Trustee Ward, seconded by Trustee Ross. Any comments or questions on this report? Any comments or questions on the report? Trustee Ward.
Yeah, hi, Brian. I'm just wondering about what you thought, let's say a couple months ago, your level of expectation with respect to enrollment on all the different age groups. Did it kind of play out somewhat, like, did you have any advanced kind of knowledge that it would play out roughly in this way, or is it, because it seems fairly positive. I'm just curious to hear what you thought.
To be honest, Trustee Ward, with COVID, we had no idea what to expect when it came to our enrollment numbers. As we got closer to school and with the transition model, and the surveys that started going out, our optimism, I guess you'd say, on being close to projection did improve. The homeschooling we knew would be definitely a change for us, and would be a higher number. We didn't know how much that would be. You know, if you would add the homeschooling numbers to our what we're up to 15, it'd be similar to where we would be last year. So, you know, the homeschooling definitely is, but some of these numbers are still going to change. Some of them are going to be going to DL and other options. So it definitely has not finished. So we really have to wait till the 30th until we know where all the kids are going to be and how that is going to impact our enrollment numbers and our funding numbers.
Okay, so Trustee Ross, you are next.
Thank you. Appreciate the volume of information. I'm quite shocked. You've only been in school for, what, 7 days, and yet you've got pretty good numbers. So I'm very encouraged by that. There was nothing on international in there, and so we're talking enrollment. So this would be a time for you just to give us and the public a bit of an update on what's happening with international numbers in the school district.
Sure, and we don't normally do it this early, but we like the numbers, like you mentioned, we've been watching our numbers on a weekly basis way back into June. got updates on our ISP numbers, and those are ones that we're still sorting through. So there's a little bit of unknown on that as well, but the numbers there are also looking better than what we thought. The board will recall that last year we had about 999, just under 1,000 students. Budget, we projected 750 students. Right now, we have 550 confirmed students that have arrived. We have another 50 that have confirmed payment but are arriving in January if the borders open. And then we have about just under 100 students that have paid that we haven't confirmed whether they're here and will be attending yet. So they basically have to the end of the month to get their refunds. So those 100 or so are the ones that we're still waiting on. If those come in, we're roughly around the 700 mark if all those stay, which is a good number compared to where we thought we would potentially be or worried where we could potentially be. But like I said, there's still some uncertainty until we reach the end of September on some of those students that have yet to be confirmed to have arrived.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so now I have Vice Chair Todd, and then I have Trustee Perot.
So thank you again, Brian. I'm somewhat relieved by these figures. Just a question, and maybe you want to ask you to speculate a little bit, but when you say the Willoughby Slope schools, the K-5 schools there, it's been less except for RC Garnet. Is that, do you think there's less people moving in, or our projections are off, or was there more uptake of homeschooling, or there's a greater level of apprehension in that area?
I don't have that level of detail yet. Like was mentioned, that we've only had a couple days of kids in school. It could be that there's more homeschooling coming out of those areas. It could be just that we did see the housing market slow down. We did see it pick up during the summer. So, it could even change in the next couple weeks. I do know that we had a lot lower numbers in Willoughby until school started, or just before school started. We had a lot of people coming in just before school started, or that first week when school was supposed to have started, but then we did the transition, with the delayed startup of a lot of students in that area. So we'll have to see, but it was noticeable that Willoughby was behind projections.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. And the last speaker on the list that I have so far is Trustee Perot. I'm sending you live, Trustee Perot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair to Secretary Treasurer, you may not have this level of information yet also. However, I'll ask it anyways, and in the event we can get it, if you don't have it, that would be wonderful. I'm interested in understanding, we saw a certain attrition rate happening, especially in our primary years, and I'm interested in understanding how many of our students who have been identified with needs did we lose in those numbers. And the other question is, of those students who are transitioning back in, how are we doing with transitioning our students with needs in according to full inclusion?
So I'm not sure I fully followed your question, Suzanne. Are you asking our special ed numbers, are they up or down, or are you asking about the transition program, the numbers in that?
I'm seeking to understand two things. One is, did we lose students with needs as a result of COVID and not being able to be due to cohorts and how things got shifted? Did we lose any students with needs from our district? Does our data show that? And then the second question is, for our students with needs, have we been, are we seeing full transition into the classrooms for those students, or are we working on a number of transition plans in, and where are we at with that in terms of getting them started?
As far as how many students we've lost through this, that's not information we've collected yet. We're only at high level numbers, and we're heading towards our projected numbers for identified students, but as to how many have left, we definitely don't have that level of detail yet. As to the second question, I think I'll pass that on to Michael Morgan as to how they're transitioning students into the programs.
All right. Okay, I will send live here. All right, here we go.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer Izeli. I'm very confident in the work that our Principal of Transition Support Model, Sam Maraka, is doing with our resource teachers to transition students with diverse abilities in that program. On tomorrow, our team will come out with what specifically services to students with diverse abilities look like in hospital homebound support, transition support model, and the regular classroom support that we have right now. So this is what we'll be talking about is how do these different groups interact with each other? How do the resource teachers interact with the SEAs? How do the SEAs interact with the families? And to provide those inclusive opportunities in every one of our new models and the existing model. And so we'll be able to have a way better indication of how successful we were. We have been at that over the next couple of weeks. Again, what I can say is that our support staff and our resource teachers have done an incredible job of getting our numbers into Brian and into learning support services to find out where our students are at. We've lost 2 weeks in what would normally be a very tight turnaround to get those numbers in. And our school psychologists and our hearing resource teachers and everyone have been just, working as fast as they can, as have our Aboriginal support workers in the Aboriginal program to get those numbers into Brian. So, what used to be 5 weeks, we basically have 2.5 weeks to do now. So I'm confident in the work of our resource teachers and support staff, and I'll be able to report that back to you in October.
Perfect, Mike. Thank you so much for having such a great response for me. I really appreciate all the work your department's doing to support our students and their families and making sure the teachers are getting wrapped around so that they can do that as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. That exhausts the speakers list that I can see. I don't see any further speakers. The motion's been moved. It's been seconded. We are once again voting in the negatory. All those in favor of receiving the enrollment report for update for information is presented. If you are opposed, please state your opposition. I'm just going to ask everybody to mute just one more time. We've got a lot of background noise. Once again, please state your opposition. I see no opposition, so the motion is carried. We're now on to the audit committee. We have a number of motions. We're going to be here for a bit approving these. Now, Secretary Treasurer, do you have comments or reports on each of these, or how would you like them to be handled, or would you like them just to be moved as we've gone through as we have gone?
I have some overview comments and just a couple slides just to summarize a few things, and then I can hand over to you for the motions if that's all right.
Yes, absolutely. So I will hand, well, you're live now, and we will start with 10.1, the approval of the audited 2019-20 financial statements.
And so just a reminder for trustees that we need to file with the ministry our financial statements for the 19-20 school year by September 30th. Part of that requirement now is the financial statement and discussion and analysis document that the district compiled last year and will continue to do so, and is also part of your package. Before I go any further, I want to take a moment to thank Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chand and his team for the phenomenal job that they've done this year with the audit. They have, especially Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chand, has really taken the load with all the other things that are happening in the district with COVID and run with it, and successfully completed the district's first ever remote audit, which was done remotely by our auditors and by staff here, which further complicated the process that is complicated enough in going through a year-end audit. So my hat off to them and the team for great work that they did in getting this package put together, and the statements, and for the clean audit that we have received. So just a reminder for the public, if you're looking at wanting to have something that's a little more easier to understand than the ministry formatted templates, I recommend taking a look at the financial statement and discussion analysis. It breaks it down in a way that's far easier to understand and to follow, because the financial statements are all consolidated of all our funds, and can be a little tricky to navigate through. So as trustees will recall, we've already gone through this with the audit committee and the finance and facilities committee, and the recommendations that are before you are coming out of the audit committee. I want to just then give a very high level, just quick summary on a few points on the statements for this year, and then go through some of the restricted proposed surplus amounts, and then hand it over to Trustee or Chair Dykeman. As mentioned, the financial statements are audited at a consolidated level, so that means it's a combination of our operating, special purpose, and capital funds. A reminder that the district is heavily reliant on our operating grant. Even when you look at all those funds combined, 76.7% of our funding is our operating grant. So even when you put capital in there, it shows how heavily reliant we are on that. Another point is of our expenditures, 90% is related to salaries and benefits. And so there's a lot of money tied in staffing levels. Just to highlight the year-end surplus, we finished in a $3.36 million surplus. That is compared to a $3.7 million deficit. And a lot of that has to do with COVID. The ministry did allow districts to keep the funding and allow us to carry funds over to offset potential costs of COVID for this coming school year. One thing the district did do as part of when the COVID hit is put in cost control measures to reduce spending, to try to put aside as much funds for the 2021 school year as possible, because there was a lot of unknowns as we finished last school year as to what we would be operating in and what kind of costs we would have, what our international students would look like, what our enrollments would look like. So we wanted to make sure that we had some funds put aside as a board to make sure that we could weather the storm. A lot of that savings came from lower spending on supplies, but also lower utility costs, as we weren't using our facilities in the same manner, and definitely a lot of savings on substitution costs that weren't happening, that would normally would have happened during the last quarter of the year. If we could go on to the next slide, just wanted to talk a little bit about the operating surpluses. The first one, as trustees will recall, is a board-controlled motion that was put in numerous years ago, based on when the deficit days, that there be funds set aside to be able to deal with any unforeseen issues that the board may come across, and that we have continued to set aside every year to be able to deal with those things. There is a requirement that if those funds are used, that they be replenished over 2 subsequent years. When we did the 2020-2021 preliminary budget, trustees will recall that we actually have already restricted $2.38 million as we tabled a unbalanced deficit budget for the 2021 year. And so we restricted those funds to be able to balance that, which is allowed by the ministry. Proposing to set aside $812,000 to have money there to balance future budgets. That would be the 21-22 or subsequent years after that. We continue to have a proposal for just over $1 million for infrastructure replacement. We have some white fleet and tax plans that need to be looked at, which once we have a little more cost certainty, we can look into using those things. $500,000 for student capacity needs or for portables as we continue to have areas in the district that grow and need expansion as we try to keep up with building of schools. We have $2.2 million for school generated funds, and those are the local school bank accounts for funds that they've collected in there. That is an accounting requirement that we show those as a surplus, but those are funds that we as a district don't touch, as those were collected by the school base and are managed from there. $488,000 for school surpluses. We allow our schools to carry over surpluses from one school year to another school year. So that is for the surpluses that schools had in the 1920 year that carry forward to the 2021. You can see that it's higher than this year due to some of the cost reduction initiatives that had happened. And we're internally restricting $37,000 for the Indigenous education. That is a targeted funding amount that it needs to be spent every year on those services. With COVID, that impacted our ability to do that. So we've set aside the amount that wasn't spent in 1920 to be spent in 2021. We also put aside $210,000 with COVID. There was a lot of things that were ordered, like some furniture for new classrooms for this school year, some learning materials that were supposed to have arrived by June, which didn't because of delays. So we want to set aside those funds so we have the funds to pay for those items that normally would have been expensed in the 1920 year if they'd arrived in time. And then the last one is the big one of the $5 million set aside as for a COVID-19 contingency fund. And that's what we've been, we're targeting, trying to get a sizable amount there to offset some of the risks that are coming with COVID during this season. So those are the restricted proposals that are in the package that have been referred to you from the audit committee, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
I do have a speakers list, so we'll start by getting the first motion on the floor, and then I will go to the speakers list. So the first motion, now Trustee Ross, as chair of the audit committee, would you, let me just, would you like to move the motions, or would you prefer I move them? Or get them on the floor? Would you like to move each motion, or would you like me to read them and then you move them? I just need you to unmute. Would you like to unmute? There you go, Trustee Ross. You're muted again. Can you hit the button one more time to unmute, please? Just it's right there. If you can just unmute one more time. Okay, there you go. You're good. So would you like to read the motions, or would you like me to?
I think you better move them the way I'm going right now. I think it'd be helpful. So you go ahead and do that. I'll be happy to move them.
Okay, perfect. So we'll get the first motion on the floor, and then we will go to our speakers list. So the motion is that the audit committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley approves the 2019-2020 audited financial statements and request staff to submit them to the Ministry of Education. Trustee Ross, as audit chair, would you like to move that?
Move that.
Trustee Ross is moving. A seconder, Trustee Coburn. And our first question is from Trustee Coburn. Go ahead. I will just move you up here. All right.
Am I good?
Yes.
So thank you, Chair. And to the Chair, I have two questions. Would you like me to do one and then go through the first round and wait for a second question?
Just do both.
Okay, so my first question to the Secretary Treasurer. Internally restricted for Indigenous education. Can you just tell me a little what this could be applied to? Chair, and to the Chair, I have two questions.
I'll just have everything mute just because of the feedback coming.
Second question? Okay, so my first question to the Secretary Treasurer. Internally restricted for Indigenous education. Can you just tell me a little
Okay, there we go. So now we're not getting it twice. Okay, so
I got it 4 times. So
Hi. Okay, so everybody can just stay muted.
Okay, I think we're good. Okay. That could be used for any of the items that we normally do with our Aboriginal. So a lot of our funding that we normally do is spent on support workers, our Aboriginal support workers, and a lot of those took the federal funding. So it pulled them out of our salaries. So we can look at doing something different with hours, doing things with programs at schools. Mr. Pugh will be working on doing that. Part of the process is that he has to submit a plan by the end of the month as to how we're going to be using those funds. I haven't seen that report yet from him, so I can't specifically say what his plans are for that. But there will be a plan because we have to basically request those funds be carried and explain why we're going to be using them for. And I imagine most districts will be doing this because of the fact that such large numbers of our costs are spent on staffing and the number of people that did take those leaves to go on the fund from the ministry or from the government. So I imagine this is be a lot of reports on these being submitted to the ministry.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer. And can I have my second?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, good question.
Yeah, so I have a bit of a follow-up that ties into my second question. So you did mention that a lot of our workers took the federal benefit, and then to kind of tie into the other contingency, the 5 million COVID, I'm just wondering, is it acceptable, allowable, if we set something up where for our staff who has to wait for benefits, is there any way we can pay them first out of that money and then reimburse them once their benefits kick in? So sometimes it takes, 4 to 6 weeks to get your benefits. And I'm just wondering if we have a pool of money that's restricted for Indigenous education, or even in our contingency, is that allowable? Because again, and it ties into my second question, which is, when we talk about risk and liability, the one thing that can never really show up on the auditor's report is how COVID, in terms of like leave and burnout and what kind of liability that's going to bring to the board. So I'm really curious how, if people have to go home or they can't go to work and they have to take a week off, where's that money coming from? And what happens to us as a district if we have to continually replace employees because they've been directed by Fraser Health to stay home? And then who pays for that for them? I'm very concerned about our employees having to be off work because of a provincial order. So I'm hoping that that you understand what I'm asking you. Good luck.
I'm trying, and let's see if I pieced it together. Are you talking in specific to the 37,000 and for our Aboriginal support workers, or are you talking more in a general statement for?
I think that the two kind of tie into each other, because I think that we have this internally restricted for Indigenous, and I'm wondering if and the same with our other for other employees, like, is it possible for us to look into making sure that there's money in advance of waiting for benefits?
Yeah,
because benefits are a bit of a privilege for some people, right?
Yeah, waiting for an event, those get into technical issues where, because once you've paid somebody, the only person that can pull back wages is the government. An employer can't garnish wages to reclaim funds back. Mm-hmm. We don't have that right. Only the government can do it, but we can't. Okay. So we wouldn't be able to do something like that and get those funds back. For the sick day question, I think is what you're asking.
Well, yeah, and just the liability, the risk to our bottom line with, we're gonna have a lot of people off, and it's gonna cost us. And I'm just wondering where that gets accounted for in the audited statements.
So that's not in the audited financial statements because that's a future event. So that wouldn't be covered under the audit per se. If you're talking about financial risk, we've earmarked some funds right now out of the federal funds for increased cost of substitutes, because the potential is there. It could go one of two ways. You could have an onslaught of people needing to be replaced, or people are a little more hesitant to take sick days for more random things, because I know we've seen in some of our other areas, people are a little more hesitant to take a day off for sick days, just because it does mean a longer period for them. So we want to encourage people, if they're truly sick, to stay home. But I think we have to work on that, obviously. Who pays for that? Well, that'll have to come out of that fund. For the employee, it would have to come out of their sick bank, because that's what those days are set aside for our employees. All our employees, our continuing employees, and do have sick day banks to draw upon. So does that answer your question?
Yes, for now. Thank you.
You're on mute.
Sorry, Trustee Cobur's had her questions, and now we're going to Vice Chair Todd. You are up next.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. So through the chair to Secretary Treasurer Brian, thrilling topic, but amortization of tangible assets. That term came up on page 1 of your report, and I'm assuming that it talks about assets that are wear out, but it was over $11 million, if I'm correct. And I know it's something we have to do for the auditors, but could you explain that term and what it means?
Well, it's a combination of things. It's the amortization of the capital cost of our buildings. It's the amortization of any equipment that has been bought. Basically, it's the expense over the life of the defined asset. So it varies by whatever asset that is. So for a building, I think it's 40 years or something like that. Or computers, it's 5 years. So it varies depending on what is purchased. So and you'll tend to see that go up as we build more buildings, because a district that's been around for a long time that hasn't built new buildings, those buildings have been depreciated. Whereas we're building very expensive buildings that are having those starting to now to depreciate over the life, their expected life.
Thank you.
So I'll just move myself up here. All right. So are there any other speakers to this motion? Any other speakers? Okay, I don't see any other speakers. So we have the approval of the audited financial statements, and they have been moved and seconded. So once again, we're voting in the negatory. So all those in favor, any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. Once again, I do not see any opposition, so the motion is carried. We're now on to item 10.2. Secretary Treasurer, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I have nothing further.
Okay, so I will need a mover for the motion that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District Number 35, Langley, approves the financial statement discussion analysis, FSD and A, with the 2019-2020 financial statements that will be brought to the September 22nd, 2020 regular board meeting for approval. And the mover would be Trustee Ross, and Trustee Coburn is seconding. Any questions on this motion? Questions on the financial statement discussion and analysis document? Oh, I think I might have okay, so we've moved that, we've seconded. So all those in favor of the Audit Committee recommends the Board of Education. Yes, Trustee Todd. Oh, you're muted. So it's moved by Trustee Coburn, or sorry, moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. And I was asking if there was any questions. I believe I saw Trustee or Vice Chair Todd's hand go up. No? Okay. All right. So seeing no speakers, all those in favor, Any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. Okay, I do not see any. We are on to the next motion, which is 10.3, which is surplus restrictions. So the motion for the board to consider is that the audit committee recommends that the Board of Education School District number 35, Langley, approves the internally restricted surplus of $3,388,260 for the internally restricted appropriated by the board as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. Trustee Ross, would you like to move that? Moved by Trustee. Yes. Trustee Coburn is seconding it. Any discussion, questions on the surplus restrictions?
No.
Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Please state your opposition in the chat. The motion is carried. We are now on to a motion that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley approves the internally restricted surplus of $812,602 to balance future budgets as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. Could I please get a mover from Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn? Any comments, questions, or discussions on this motion? Seeing none, please, all those in favor, and then any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. Oh, is there a question or just any? Nope. Okay, any opposition? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Next motion is that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35, Langley, approves the internally restricted surplus of $1,007,004 for infrastructure replacement as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. Could I please get a mover? Mover is Trustee Ross, seconder is Trustee Coburn. Any comments, questions, or discussion? I do not see anyone. That being said, all those in favor, any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. Checking the chat, I do not see any opposition, so we will say that motion is carried. Next item is that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley approves the internally restricted surplus of $500,000 for student capacity needs as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. I will need a mover from Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Any comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. I see no opposition in the chat. That motion is carried. All right. So now I have another motion that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley approves the internally restricted surplus of $2,220,943 for the school generated funds balance that has not been spent and now is part of the operating surplus due to the PSAB as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. A mover with Trustee Ross, seconder with Trustee Coburn. Any comments or questions on that? Comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor, please state your opposition in the chat. I do not see any opposition. The motion is carried. Next motion is that the Audit Committee recommends that the Langley Board of Education School District number 35, Langley approves, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, the internally restricted school operating fund surpluses of $488,628 from 2019 to 2020 be carried forward to the 2020-2021 for schools as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Any comments or questions on that item?
No.
No, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Please state your opposition in the chat. I do not see any opposition. Next motion, that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35, Langley, approves the internally restricted surplus of $37,561 for Indigenous education as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements, moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Is there any questions or comments on that item? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Please state your opposition in the chat. I do not see any opposed. All right, we are now on to the next motion, that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley approves the internally restricted surplus of $210,000 for commitments from 2019-2020 as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. I have a mover with Trustee Ross, and I have a seconder with Trustee Coburn. And is there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Please state your opposition in the chat. Motion's carried. The next motion is that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35, Langley, approves the internally restricted surplus of $5 million for COVID-19 contingency from 2019-2020, as described in Note 12 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements. Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Any comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, the motion is, all those in favor, any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. Kind of get into a bit of a trance to the 400th one. All right, okay, so that motion is carried. I don't see any opposition in the chat. We're now on to 10.4, inter-fund transfers.
No, I think you're missing one. Do we do number 12? Recommendation 12.
We did. It was the COVID-19.
Oh, maybe I'm mistaken. Okay. What's the 2,178,000? Recommendation 12. Did we do that one?
That's the interfund one she was just about to do, Trustee Ross.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see the interfund. Okay, go ahead. My apologies. Too keen.
It's okay. I know it's been a long meeting. We're good. All right, so we're on to interfund transfers. Secretary Treasurer, do you have anything on that?
No, it's just that it's a requirement of our policies that any interfund transfers come with a motion from the board. So this is just basically the funds that we've used from our operating funds to buy capital equipment.
Okay, thank you. All right, so coming out of Audit Committee, we have item number 10.4, and that is a motion that the Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 35 approves the transfer of $2,178,139 from the operating fund to the capital fund, as described in Note 13 of the 2019-2020 audited financial statements, moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Please state your opposition in the chat. All right, so that concludes the business of the Audit Committee. We are now on to new business. Trustee Wilson, so with new business, a motion can happen by a majority of the board to add an item under new business as per policy 1204. I'd like to say before we go to the motion, there were requests from other trustees to add items through myself and David, who do agenda setting, and those were turned down because of the length of the agenda. So each item would have to be approved to go on the agenda one at a time. We wouldn't be debating the item, we'd be debating adding the agenda item first. So if you'd like to go first and state your items you'd like to add to the agenda tonight, and we will vote on them one at a time to add to the agenda.
Okay, so I'd like to start with a point of order. I believe that the motion to amend the agenda at the beginning of our meeting was out of order because according to Robert's rules on page 372, at a session that already has an order of business, an agenda can be adopted by a majority vote only. It does not create any special orders, or only if it does not create any special orders and does not conflict with the existing order of business. Otherwise, a 2/3 vote is required. So because this did conflict with the existing order of business, I believe you need a 2/3 vote.
Thank you for that point of order, Trustee Wilson. That only counts if you go to Robert's Rules of Order. A existing order of business, it means under Robert's Rules of Order that you do not actually approve the agenda. The agenda goes out and the agenda as is. Because our policy it talks about, adding motions and so on and approving the agenda, we do not have what is considered under Robert's Rules of Order a standing agenda. If you'd like, I can provide that information after the meeting. So that's a point of order. Absolutely, I'd be happy to. Okay, so new business. If you'd like to add the items one at a time.
Yes, I would. Okay, so first of all, I would like to refer the motion that came up earlier with the policies. I'd like to refer the policy, move that we refer the policy handbook and administrative procedures to a special regular meeting of the board to be held in October. So the word special being the difference.
Okay, so the first motion that would have to happen would be to actually add that motion to the agenda. Because at the time you could have moved to refer it, but now you're asking for a separate motion. So, so all those in favor of adding this item to the agenda, we have a mover. Could I get a seconder? The seconder is Trustee Coburn. And this is to add something to the agenda. So we would have to vote to approve to add it. So that's what we'll be voting on. So to approve to add the item to the agenda. So all those in favor of approving to add the item to the agenda. All those opposed to adding the item to the agenda, please state your opposition in the chat. Opposed to adding the item. Any opposed to adding the item to the agenda? Last call for opposed to adding the item to the agenda. Okay, and so, so we have added, there's only 2 opposed. The remainder appear to be in favor. So we will add the item of a special in camera for policy, for special in camera for the policy book to the agenda to debate that. Okay, next item you'd like to add under new business.
Okay, I would also like to add a motion. Gosh, where are they here? That the Langley Board of Education lobby the Minister of Education to discontinue the Foundational Skills Assessment FSA tests, and that in the meantime, the Langley School District provide families with a simple, no pressure mechanism for opting out of writing the FSAs.
Okay.
Point of order?
Yes.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that the motion that Trustee Wilson gave is the same motion that you said was approved, because I thought she said a special regular meeting, and I think you said a special in camera.
Okay, yes, sorry.
So I just want to make sure that it's, you know.
Yes, and she'll be restating the motion when it comes up.
Okay, because that was the one that was approved. So
yeah,
I just want to make sure.
Onto the agenda, then we'll discuss it. Okay, so you have asked for a motion. Can you restate that one more time that you want to add?
that the Langley Board of Education lobby the Minister of Education to discontinue the Foundation Skills Assessment FSA tests, and that in the meantime, the Langley School District provide families with a simple, no pressure mechanism for opting out of writing the FSAs.
Okay, so you would need a seconder to add that to the agenda. Seconded by Trustee Coburn. So we'll be stating our opposition to adding this to discuss tonight at the meeting. And just to make it very clear, once you have, if something doesn't get added to the agenda, you still have the ability to bring it later. So, okay, all those in favor, any opposed, please state your opposition to adding this to the agenda in the chat. Okay, anybody opposed to adding this to the agenda tonight, please state in the chat.
Can't. Opposed.
Okay, anybody, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, so, all right, so we are adding that to the agenda tonight, FSAs. Okay, and then you had one more, I believe.
Yes. So motion that the Langley School District increase any COVID-19 measures in schools that they feel aren't in line with the provincial health officer's orders on COVID-19.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I couldn't hear you.
Doesn't make sense.
That the Langley School District increase any COVID-19 safety measures in schools that they feel aren't in line with the provincial health officer's orders on COVID-19.
Okay.
If you want me to give a little background, I could of what I actually mean.
So at this point, we're looking at adding this to the agenda. Trustee Coburn has seconded that. I'm leery to see this one added, but this is something that we would usually send to agenda setting. We could discuss next month. So all those in favor of adding this to the agenda, any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat, please. Any opposed? Please state your opposition in the chat. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hands.
Okay.
All those opposed, raise your hands. Okay, so the motion, sorry, go ahead, Trustee Carr.
Yeah, so several on the last votes, my chat box is not working. It's not.
No, we see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, are you seeing my opposed?
Yes.
I can read these up. Okay, so I have Trustee Ross, Trustee Todd opposed. Any other people opposed to adding increasing measures to the agenda tonight? Okay, we have added those. All right, so those are our new business. And so Trustee Wilson, I'll have you go ahead on your first motion. If you can please read it in its entirety, and then I'll need a seconder for your motion because the motions tonight were simply just to add them.
Great. Okay, so my first motion is I move that we refer the policy handbook and administrative procedures to a special regular meeting of the board to be held in October.
Okay, that's seconded by Trustee Coburn. Trustee Wilson, if you'd like to open up your rationale for having a special meeting for that.
Perfect. Okay, so as people at home who received the agenda package probably can see, there are over 500 pages, and I believe very strongly that this process must be done at a special meeting that is specifically for this purpose. And it must be done in public where we are prepared to show the current policy, the proposed revisions to a policy, the strikeouts and italicized, and a rationale for those proposed changes, and any debate on the changes in a transparent public meeting. The public is entitled to know how these policies were arrived at and which trustees were in favor or opposed to the changes. The process that we undertook to get where we are today with these policies was not something I was comfortable with, which I stated on several occasions throughout the process. These policies need to be discussed or debated in front of the public. It is our job to govern transparently. I also want to point out that we have not met a single time since receiving the updated administrative procedures, which we should look at as a board to see what administrative procedures came out of policy. This process deserves far more time than we as a board have put into it. There are 524 pages We need to work together in a thoughtful manner that the public deserves, and I don't believe this process should be taken on at a regular meeting, as it may be long and arduous, and only the people interested in this process would need to watch. Thank you.
All right, any other speakers to this motion? Any other speakers to this motion? Trustee Pearl. Yes, go ahead, Trustee Pearl.
All right, sorry, my computer's doing its own thing and turning me on and off. Pardon me. Just a point of clarification to Trustee Wilson. I agree regarding policy and that we need to have discussions around policy. That's a very important part of our good work. But I have a point of clarification. When you say we have not met, are you saying met on the policy or just met in general? Can you clarify that statement, please?
Yes, I meant that we have not met since we received the administrative procedures, what we just got, I think, in the beginning of last week, I'm not sure. So that was an extra 500 and something pages that we really should be reviewing to see where it came out of the policy and if those are all things that we are okay with coming out of policy. So because that's new to us, I just feel like it deserves its own time.
All right.
Thank you for clarifying.
Trustee Coburn. You're live. Trustee Coburn.
Yeah, I was just unmuting. So just my battery might die on my computer and I wanted to get my comment in before I went to get my battery. So just to a point that I think is quite valid that Trustee Wilson has made is that typically, and in my experience, when I've sat on a PAC or anything like that in the Constitution, it's very clear that we have to show the changes, we have to show what's been redacted, we have to do that, and that's part of transparency, and that's part of good governance. And I would hate to miss that really important step because we aren't going to give this the time it deserves publicly. So to have it in a public meeting where, yeah, we're done, we've taken trustee comments off to save time, so then pulling out policies to talk about it in the same meeting isn't going to work. So in order to give the attention that it deserves, and also to do it in a way where we can feel really good about it, so that we can look at it and say, hey, listen, everyone, we were transparent. We held this meeting. We put everything up. We were willing to justify these changes.
Oh, I think we lost Trustee Coburn. Unfortunately, her battery must have gone. Trustee Coburn, just before I go to the next speaker. Okay, let me just send myself live here and see what happens. Okay, so Trustee Coburn will be back. She's frozen at this moment. So thank you, Trustee Coburn, for your comments. Now, I do have a couple comments, but I'd like to see if the Secretary Treasurer or Superintendent have any comments they'd like to add before I go on. And it's okay if you don't. I just do want to give you an opportunity if you have anything you'd like to add. Okay. Secretary Treasurer, did you have a comment or are you good?
Yeah, if this is the will of the board to have a straight redaction, then this needs to be postponed probably months because the amount of work that would take to go and do the track changes for the fact that we've completely changed the whole process would take a huge amount of staff time, and it would not even be possible to have done for an October meeting.
Okay. Thank you. I would just like to say myself, you know, for some context of the timeline, the conversation originated in December the 3rd, 2018. And the board met on May 25th for the first session, which was an all-day session from 9 to 4, and then met again subsequently on October 28th, 2019 for a second session, which I would believe was about 5 hours. It was quite a long evening one. I believe it went from 5 to 10 at the end of the day. Then we met again on March 9th, 2020, and then the entire policy book was sent out to the board for review as a complete package prior to the summer, just the policies. Then 11 days ago on September the 10th, 2020, the entire package, including the admin procedures, were sent to all trustees, 11 days. This was something concern that I became aware of actually just Monday. And I'd like to say that the admin procedures are the secretary or the superintendents. They are not the boards. We receive them for information. We do not have any governance over them. If we have an issue with something that is not covered in policy because it's in admin procedure, any trustee may bring a motion and by majority will of the board, bring it back to policy. And it can become a policy. But those are the superintendent's guidebook for him doing his work. And we oversee that through a performance assessment of the superintendent. And through our work in policy, we can add things to the policy. We do not the admin procedures are simply something we as a board are acknowledging have been completed. They're not the work of the board. The policy committee, like I said, will be able to look at these policies as they go forward. So I do not support that type of strike through thing. I don't mind having a separate meeting to receive it, but I don't support the rationale. So unfortunately, I can't support the motion because I don't support the rationale for it. These are two entirely different books. We went through a process. All of this has been sent out to the public. The public will have 60 days to ask questions. The trustees have been working on this since 2018. And as these policies went, we asked whether there was support for each one of them. And there were 4 hands at least on each one of them. This didn't go out to notice of motion until we knew that there were 4 hands at least or more on them. So that is my my view of it. And so with that, we have had the motion to have a special meeting is what's before the assembly. Are there any others? Marnie,
Sorry.
Second comment. Trustee Coburn, do you have a second
Sorry,
comment?
my battery totally died, and so I was just finishing up my comments, and I missed the rest of the comments, and so I'm just wondering if there was anything other. So just to be clear, I just really like it for transparency, and so the public can see what we've changed. That's my idea for supporting it, and I'm just wondering what I missed while I was getting my battery.
The Secretary Treasurer just indicated that he wouldn't be able to do the work that Trustee Wilson was sort of indicating she'd be interested in. The challenge we have right now is the motion that's before the Assembly right now is actually for a special in camera. And there was a
regular.
Sorry, I keep saying in camera. A special regular meeting. I'm so tired. A special regular meeting. And then Trustee Wilson indicated her interest in seeing a strike through side by side, which is a separate issue. So the Secretary Treasurer has indicated that that wouldn't be possible by October. So Trustee Wilson has a second. Oh, sorry. I have a.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Trustee Todd, you have a question, and then I'm going to go to Trustee Wilson for second questions. But if there's another person who has not had a first question, please let me know if you'd like to speak. Go ahead, Trustee Todd.
Okay, so am I live? Can everybody hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sending you live right now. There's a little bit of a lag, and then next in the queue will be Trustee Ross. He has a question.
Okay, so to say that I'm feeling a little bit ambushed because this was a long and arduous process. We did a lot of work on this, and yes, it began in camera, and then we spent several evenings and we tore apart policy after policy and put it back together. And to say now that we should be playing with the trains and telling what should be in the admin procedures is somewhat offensive. That's not our governance. I specifically want to speak about on page 56 of the new things. There is a concern that once this policy is set, that it's done in stone. Specifically, any trustee, employee, parent, student, or other community member may make suggestions regarding the possible development of policy and the need for policy revisions on any matter by presenting a proposal for a policy or revisions in writing to the superintendent. The proposal shall contain a brief statement of purpose or rationale. That is transparent.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Todd. I'm now going to go to Trustee Coburn. Would you like back on the speakers list? I have a first time.
Well, I'm just wondering if Marnie, if Trustee Wilson would entertain a friendly amendment or divide her motion.
You would have to move it. There's no friendly amendment. So if you want to move an amendment after Trustee Ross speaks, I can add you on that because
sure. Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
And then we will go to Marnie, who was next, and then you. Okay, so go ahead, Trustee Ross.
Well, thank you. Kind of disappointed, really. I think it's rather disrespectful. Our staff have been working on this for months.
Hours.
Brian has been working on this. It's been such a burden for him. And you talk about wanting to protect our staff. Well, you just listened to him right now, and he just said, I can't do this. This is an impossible task. It's going to take months. And I just find that very disrespectful. And so I will not be supporting this. And I'm really just disheartened by it. Thank you.
Okay, so I have Trustee Wilson, and then I have Trustee Coburn.
I'll let Trustee Coburn go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to send Trustee Coburn first. Trustee Coburn, you're live. You're muted though, unfortunately, still, so you'll need to unmute yourself.
There, am I good?
You are good.
I would like to move that we separate the motion so that we have one motion for a special regular public meeting of the board and one where the track changes and everything are to be included. And then that way, if people are in support of a special regular, then they don't have to be in support of the other. And then we could vote on that after, which then could be included in the special general. But I just would like to move that we separate the motions.
Yeah, the challenge is that there isn't two motions, so there's nothing to separate. The motion that's being considered before the assembly right now is a motion to have a special regular meeting. All right, so I'm going to send Trustee Wilson live now.
I have no objection to removing the preamble that I discussed having the track changes. Obviously, I love having feedback from my fellow trustees and our staff. And if I realized that the track changes would be that much work and take that much time, I wouldn't have suggested them. But I do want to reiterate from the other trustees' comments that yes, we've been doing this since this date or that date. We didn't have all of this at once. Our very first meeting when we started was literally to hear what the process would be like. Then we got a little bundle of like 5 policies. A few months later at another meeting, like we finally got our package. I forget when, like a couple months ago. And then 11 days ago, we got the administrative procedures. And I am by no means saying that is my work. I'm saying those were pulled out of policy. And so until I can see them and say, do I think those things should have come out of policy? I've had no time with my colleagues to even look at this or ask staff the rationale of why they came out of the policies. So all I'm saying is that this deserves time and consideration in a transparent manner that has its own separate time so that it can be given the consideration it should, because this is our work as trustees. Thank you all for your comments.
Thank you. So we're going to go to vote. I'd just like to point out that not all of the admin procedures have come out of policy. Most of the admin procedures were admin procedures already. And there were a few that have been, repurposed from being a policy to admin procedure and vice versa. But the body of the admin procedures is not at all related to, just all of these things went out of policy and went into admin procedure. That would not be factually correct. I've got one last comment, which will be Trustee Ward, and then at this point we will be voting on the motion of a special regular meeting for consideration of policy. Okay, I'm sending Trustee Ward live.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Dykeman. I just wanted to say, I think we're actually all after similar things here, albeit from different perspectives, not just to sit on the fence here, but I think there is a lot of work that's being done. Obviously, we don't want to negate any of that, but obviously at the same time, we want to be as transparent as possible. The question is, how do we show that? It has been a good and lengthy and robust process. The question is, how do we demonstrate to the public that, hey, look, we're not just willy-nilly going about something. We have gone through a real robust process. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe as far as voting on this particular thing, I think a little bit of work to demonstrate that to the public might be in order, but a whole change or a massive undertaking is a whole nother thing. So I'll probably be voting in this case in favor. Thank you.
So once again, this special in camera, just as a little.
Special regular.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Special regular.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to write that down so I can remember it. The special regular meeting that would be held would be to serve notice to the public. And then 60 days would pass where the public feedback would be coming in. So the question that's being put to the Assembly today, which has been moved and seconded, is whether the notice of motion being served needs to take place in a special regular meeting or whether it can be part of the October package. Yeah. So I'm going to call the question now. All those in favor of holding a separate special regular meeting in October, please raise your hand. Any opposed, please state your opposition in the chat.
Oh, sorry. I'm feeling conflicted, sorry, because I still had a question to help me clarify and understand to make a sound decision, and I feel like I can't move.
Trustee Pro, I didn't see your question. I'm sorry. It was below the bar, so would you like to ask your question and then I'll recall the vote?
I would appreciate that. Please, through the chair to Trustee Wilson. Trustee Wilson, I'm trying to understand the full intent, the fulsome intent of the motion. So this is what I'm understanding, and I need you to fill the gaps because I feel like I'm getting lost in the dialogue that's occurring. So in the special regular meeting, to present the policy package, the intent is to present the package and provide opportunity for time to have discussion. Is that what I'm hearing you say, but not go through the redacted pieces, line by line, whatever, but just present the policy and provide that space for dialogue between trustees live? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, at this point, I'm willing to take any opportunity to have discussion on these policies in a transparent manner, and I feel it'll be too long to add to a regular meeting, and that it's not fair for people that want to tune in to see the regular business of the board to go through these policies and some of the admin procedures that may have been pulled from the policies.
Okay, so you want to do the policies plus admin. I'm in support of policies, but not tackling the admin stuff. I don't feel I'm in agreement with what Trustee Ross says regarding that process, and definitely policy 10 gives us that policy making review gives us that privilege to inject on the admin procedures and give license to comment to that. So that's kind of like, I feel like we're getting lost in a number of different circles, and so I just want to be really clear because I think I'm hearing your heart, but I'm not abundantly clear.
I think you're pretty clear from what you've restated.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm allowing second questions, but once again, we have 2 questions per motion. So Trustee Ward.
Okay, thank you. I just want to comment on Trustee Perot's comments and clarification. So thank you very much for that. I would be in agreement with Trustee Perot's about taking out that portion and remaining the other portion as a separate in camera. Okay, I'm not going to even try, but as a separate meeting. So I think that's
regular.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great way to divide it up. Thank you. I'm supportive of what you just said. Thank you.
I have one question for clarification. The policies are being served as a package, and they would be going out, and the intent of this special, separate, regular meeting of the board, would this be an intent to approve each policy separately and pull them out, or a package? Because the intent and what the board spoke about was the package would be redacted and a new package would be put in its place.
Right, and we were also told that at any point during that process, there would be a process at a regular board meeting where we could pull policies to discuss them further, and that all we were doing was putting together a package to take to the regular board meeting.
Okay. I have just a second, Trustee Pro, yes?
No, I wasn't there.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, sorry, Trustee Pro.
That's okay.
To the point with the admin procedures and the policy, I don't need to deal with the admin procedures either, but I would say that any policies that were taken out and made admin procedures, as trustee, I would like to know what that is. And that's not an offense to the staff and their work. That's a trustee policy. And if it's been taken out, I think that we should be able to at least discuss that and not have our staff feel like it's a slight, because it's not. It's just us being accountable for what's in our little wheelhouse, which is policy. And so if it's been taken out, I do think it should be addressed. But other than that, the admin procedures, no, I don't need them. But anything that's been removed, made admin procedure, I really think warrants some conversation. That's my 2 cents.
I have one last comment after, just as a point of clarification, not on debate, and then but Trustee Pro does have something she'd like to clarify, and then we do need to move on to the other 2 motions as it's 10:15.
Am I on?
Yes, you are alive.
Okay.
Now.
Thank you so much. Just in terms of, this is really difficult, and so I really want to acknowledge and appreciate each of you for wrestling through this. First and foremost, at our last, I think it was our last meeting with Mr. Sloan, and I raised a question regarding pulling out the policy, and I zoned in, which I sat on quite heavily through the whole journey, upon the policy of restraint and seclusion, because I struggled with the wording. And when I pulled it out yet again at the last meeting and said, I'm concerned about the wording, I want to be sure that we're able to tackle the wording, and it's a really strong point of memory for me, and I have to say this, and so forgive me, and it's a really difficult one. I was slighted against my stand on inclusion, not from you, not from my fellow trustees, from the facilitators, and then I corrected him and I said, no, we're not going to do this. And I just need to know. And I was assured at that point that we would take it to policy. It would go to policy, not to the board. It would go to policy, and that it would be protected, and that we would be able to pull out those pieces and take it to policy.
Anytime.
And the reason why I'm citing that incident, because it was such a strong point of impact on my personhood that day, and a very heartbreaking situation for me and my community. But I absolutely, unequivocally remember him saying, because of audiences, it's going to go to, we have the right to take it to policy. And so I just want to use that as a point of clarification. Right now, we're a growing district, and our primary vision is our kids. And so we need to ensure that we're not creating complexities that hinder effective growth for the classrooms, for the kids and their experiences. We need to make sure we're unhindering those unnecessary complexities, and some of those unnecessary complexities is an oversized policy manual of policies none of us have never seen. In order for us to be effective, we need to simplify ourselves so that we can empower our leaders, and that was the real goal of what we're doing, and get rid of unscalable processes. Again, that's what we're trying to do. By going through too much of this, we're creating unscalable processes and perpetuating unhealthy mindsets by exhausting each other. I want to support my team. I want to uplift this district. I want to work for our students, for our classrooms, and I want to see our leaders get developed. And when we get stuck too long, we hinder that, and we're the 7th largest district in this province, and we're growing up, we're moving up, we're growing up. We need to get through this well, and I want to support you, Marnie, in that transparency piece. That's critical, and I hear your heart, but I want to make sure we're mindful and careful about how we do it, not for the sake of hiding, not for the things that we've been told we're doing that I read in social media, but for the sake of doing the right thing. And when we're working in a complex district like what we're dealing with right now at the exponential growth, we got to make sure we're enabling our leadership team. This conversation is disabling.
I would love to be able to answer that since it was my motion, and I feel like the main thing that Suzanne brought up there is exactly why the procedures are what I wanted to talk about, the ones that were pulled out of policy, because physical restraint and seclusion that I know you were passionate about is no longer going to be a policy. It is now an administrative procedure. So when you were told that at that meeting that we would talk about it in policy, no, we won't be talking about it in policy because it is no longer going to be a policy after this vote. And so it's things like that that were pulled from, it was policy 7300, and now it's going to be administrative procedure 354. And so all I'm saying is at that meeting, it's important to know what was pulled from policy so that we have time. We've never seen these all together as a board. We got them 11 days ago, those administrative procedures. I feel like until we've had time to just sit together and go over these and see what was pulled from policy and discuss any of the policies, that we won't have come to a proper, meaningful decision.
Okay, so point of order correction before I go to our very last speaker who hasn't had an opportunity to speak twice, Trustee Ross. What our facilitator said at that meeting was that any administrative procedure or any matter of that can be brought to policy to be considered as a policy, which I believe is exactly what Trustee Perot was speaking to. These are not left. This is not a dead document, but this is not what we're debating. We're debating whether or not there's going to be a special meeting. The motion that's germane is whether or not there's going to be a special meeting to consider this separately. Trustee Ross, last comment, and then the question will be called for vote.
Well, again, thank you for the discussion all, and thank you for your comments. And again, I'm really disappointed. I was really hoping we could move this along. However, it looks like it's going to take some time, so it is what it is, and we'll bear with it. But I just want to say how disappointed I am. I think this really is a slam against our staff and for the hours that we put in. You don't have to agree with me, but that's
okay,
my
order. We don't talk over other trustees when they have the floor. Okay, closing debate. The motion's been moved and seconded. The motion before the assembly is whether or not this will be a special, separate, regular meeting, special meeting of the board, or not. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please state your opposition.
Okay, hold on.
Sorry?
Can I ask that the motion is read out in its entirety, just so that I have it clearly worded? Thank you.
Yes,
please.
you read the motion one more time, please, Trustee Wilson, in its entirety.
Yes, I move that we refer the policy handbook and administrative procedures to a special regular meeting of the board to be held in October.
Okay. Special regular meeting of the board in October. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. So if I can see hands up if you're in favor, opposition if you're in the chat. Hands up in favor. 1, 2, 3. Opposed in the chat, I have Trustee Todd. I have Trustee Ross. Anybody else who's good? Trustee Pro?
I'm struggling.
Okay. Well, the motion right now is we have Trustee Todd, Trustee Ross, Trustee myself opposed. If the motion remains tied because you abstain, the motion fails. Or we can refer this to another time to consider. Okay. Okay. So we will be having it on the regular meeting. Motion fails. Next motion, Trustee Wilson.
Okay, that the Langley Board of Education lobby the Minister of Education to discontinue the Foundation Skills Assessment, FSA tests, and that in the meantime, the Langley School District provide families with a simple, no pressure mechanism for opting out of writing the FSAs.
Okay, so that's the motion that's on the floor. Seconder, is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second.
The motion is seconded by Trustee Todd. Trustee Wilson, would you like to speak to this motion, please?
Yes, please. So for people that are watching that aren't familiar, the FSAs or the Foundation Skills Assessment are tests that are given to BC's grade 4 and 7 students every year. The Fraser Institute misuses this information on a regular basis to rank schools. Teachers have, in my opinion, a much richer and effective way to gauge student progress and identify challenges to inform their teaching than they'll ever get out of the FSAs. Parents who want their kids excused from writing often feel pressured from their principals or the districts or the ministry to the districts. So this is often not an easy route for people to take. The ministry, yes, applies pressure. To quote one of the ex-Vancouver School Board trustees, Patty Backus, the privatization promoting Fraser Institute uses the data to put out a report card on schools, complete with school rankings. It's a perverse and misleading report that has been condemned and is discredited by anyone who knows anything about education. It's popular with real estate agents, however, whom advertise homes as being close to top schools. I don't believe this fits with the new curriculum, and this form of standardized assessment is outdated.
Okay, and can you please repeat the motion one more time?
Yes, that the Langley Board of Education lobby the Minister of Education to discontinue the Foundation Skills Assessment, FSA tests, and that in the meantime, the Langley School District provide families with a simple, no pressure mechanism for opting out of writing the FSAs.
Okay, so in hearing that motion one more time, the board doesn't lobby, so I would need something else, like a letter, or how would you like the board to lobby? We don't lobby. We can write letters, we can state our opposition in a public meeting, we can send it to a board chair meeting, but you need to actually have a motion, so I will need an amendment to that motion.
Okay, I can amend it if you want.
Sure. If you could just get an amendment just to it, please, to what the
I will amend it to say that the Langley Board of Education write a letter
to
the Minister of Education.
All right.
And then the rest of it would still continue. Do you want me to read it in full?
Just read it in full now one more time so everybody is aware. And then I will get the amendment seconded. We'll vote on the amendment and then we'll go back and vote on the full motion. So read that one more time, please.
That the Langley Board of Education write a letter to the Minister of Education to discontinue the Foundation Skills Assessment, FSA tests, and that in the meantime, the Langley School District provide families with a simple, no pressure mechanism for opting out of writing the FSAs.
Okay, could I get a seconder to the amendment, please? So we're seconding an amendment, seconded by Trustee Todd. So we're just going to vote now on the amendment, okay? So Trustee Todd, is your question related to the amendment? Or is it related to what will be the main motion? Trustee Ross? No? Okay, so let's vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, so that the main motion will now be writing a letter. Any opposed to the amendment? Okay, so the amendment's carried. We're now the main motion that we're speaking to is writing a letter. Now I do have speakers to it. Trustee Wilson, you've spoken to the main motion. Are you good with me just going to the speakers list now?
Yes.
Okay, so first person on the speakers list is Trustee Todd, and I'm going to send Trustee Todd live on that motion. You're still muted, Trustee Todd. Still muted. How you doing, Trustee Todd? Can I get you unmuted? Okay, so I'm just going to go to Trustee Ross, and I'm going to come back to Vice Chair Todd in just a second once he gets his sound sorted. So, okay, Trustee Ross, you are live, and Trustee Todd's just getting his sound sorted out.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of people that don't like the FSA, and I understand full well how the Fraser Institute uses it. So once a year, they get a little bit of a plug. However, when we think about transparency, we think about accountability. Parents do need to have some sort of understanding of what's happening in the classroom, and this is one of the tools for the government to have an idea of what the accountability is for all the money they're spending for the schools in the province. So I think it's a healthy tool, and you know, I'm not going to live or die on this, but I still think that my second comment really is going to the government and saying, hey, you guys, we don't like this. You know, in a time when we have a relationship with the provincial government, which is questionable in that they seem to make life difficult for boards that don't see life the way they do. So I'm really not anxious to get into a fight with them. It's likely they're just going to continue on anyway. So go ahead, write a letter, but I won't be supportive of it, and I would encourage the majority of the board to do the same. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Ross. I'm going to see, Trustee Todd, can you quickly unmute yourself and let me know if you're there, Trustee Todd? Trustee Todd. Okay, so is there any other speakers to this motion? Any other speakers to the motion? Trustee Ward, I'm going to send you live now.
Thank you. I had mixed feelings about this as well. I think that there's a timing for everything. Upon reflection with Trustee Ross's comments, I do think this might further distance us from them, although I appreciate Trustee Wilson's comments. This is one of those challenging things, so I will not be supporting this motion upon further reflection. Thank you.
All right, are there any other speakers to this? I just want to scroll down and see if we've got Trustee Todd back on here. Trustee Todd, are you back on? All right, he will be back on. All right, so I'm just checking to see if we have any other speakers to this motion. Okay, with that, I will call the question. No other speakers, so all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. All those opposed, please state your opposition in the chat. All right, so we have a motion. One more time, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the motion is defeated. Now we are on to the next item, which would be your next motion. Trustee Wilson, I'm going to send you live.
Okay.
There's Todd back.
Great. So my next motion is I move that the Langley School District increase any COVID-19 safety measures in schools that they feel aren't in line with the Provincial Health Officer or PHO's orders on COVID-19.
Okay, before I go to have a seconder on this motion, I would need a little bit of clarification. Whose assessment, are you saying that the superintendent, or who? Can you just dig into that bit so we can see if it's in order?
Yeah, I just, we've recently been hearing over and over from our different government levels of government that school boards now have autonomy to make their own safety decisions instead of following the original plan that they sent to schools. And since they keep throwing this out there that it's not up to them and putting it back on us, I just felt like it's up to our board then to give direction to the district to say, you know, feel free to go above and beyond what the original plan laid out.
Okay, so you're asking that the Langley Board of Education give direction to staff to increase things that, in the opinion of the board, doesn't meet BHO?
No.
Okay, can you repeat the motion one more time and then I'll ask.
The Langley School District increase any COVID-19 safety measures in schools that they feel aren't in line with the provincial health officer, PHO's orders on COVID-19.
Okay, so the Langley districts, that would be the superintendent. Okay, so is there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Trustee Coburn. All right, so I'm open debate, and then after you've spoken, Trustee Wilson, I will check and see if staff has anything they'd like to add, and then I will go to a speakers list.
Great. So yeah, my main intent for this motion is so that staff do not feel handcuffed by the different orders that keep changing that are just for schools, while everywhere else in the province seems to have a different level of safety with the provincial health officer. So because we are no longer, according to Premier Horgan the other day, and over, I keep seeing social media spit out this stuff from our different ministries, school boards are autonomous to come up with their own safety procedures. So I just feel like it is up to us to tell staff that this news, that they are in charge of making these safety plans, and that if they feel that, like with the other health or the other safety precautions being taken in other parts of our communities, where we have been told that if you can't physically distance, you need to wear a mask, or that we can put plexiglass up to help keep individuals safe, or that there's different barriers that they want to use, that I feel like if those are orders for the rest of our province, then we aren't under any restriction to follow a special school guideline where things keep changing off the list of issues you have to be considered sick and stay home, like taking off runny nose now that's there for everybody else, that we should be able to allow staff to follow the actual provincial health officer's orders and not stick to a specialized school safety plan that doesn't seem to be in line with those. So that is the intent of my motion, because according to our different levels of government, schools are no longer restricted to staying under a special school safety plan. They have autonomy to follow their own and make their own decisions.
Okay, so Superintendent, before I go down the speakers list, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, as you're on the operationals end of this?
Actually, sorry, thank you. I'll turn that over to, really, this has fallen predominantly into Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan's domain, so maybe he can speak to this one.
Okay, I just need to find him. There he is. Hello, Assistant Superintendent. I'm sending you live.
Hi, you can hear me, I hope.
Yes, you're live.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get a handle on the intent of the motion. I can say with confidence that we already exceed in many cases the the recommendations from the ministry. The ministry recommendations are also approved by the provincial health office as well before they even come to us. And I'll very honestly say I don't think we've ever felt restricted in any way on that. A lot of that has to do with, having enough personnel and being able to manage and organize a very large system. But again, if I'm misunderstanding the intent of the motion, Trustee Wilson, correct me. But my sense of it, because it falls under my authority and leadership to make sure things are enacted, that the guidelines we have already in all cases for exceed all of our enhanced cleaning requirements in all of our schools, which all of our schools follows. There's parts of that that are that exceed what the ministry guidelines say. For example, if you were to go by the minimum of the ministry, washrooms only need to be cleaned twice a day. We clean them actually every hour and a half. Staff rooms would only need to be cleaned twice a day. They actually are cleaned 3 times a day. So if the intent of the motion is to say, give us some leeway and be able to go beyond what we think the restrictions are, I guess I would reflect back and say to you that I just don't feel we're under restrictions, and we're already exceeding it.
Okay. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm just sent Trustee Coburn live. Then it will be Trustee Ward and then Trustee Todd. And then barring any other trustees, I have some comments too. So go ahead, Trustee Coburn.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Ward, you're next. I'm sending you live now.
Oh, thank you. My comments I can remove too.
Okay, thank you. I have Trustee Todd now who I'm going to send live.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You're not muted.
Okay, thank you. Relief. I missed so much of this meeting, on and on. I think I understand the intent of this motion, and I really, my heart goes out to it, and I do believe that we should at least meet the safety orders. My concern, though, and that's what's out there, is that if we followed a different protocol, because let's face it, the school's safety orders are different than commercial buildings. They're different than other things. And we are under a different thing, different set of regulations. So what would happen is likely we would incur a tremendous cost that probably wouldn't be covered by the government, even though they've told us we're independent entities. When it comes to actually paying for the bill, they would say, you went and did this and spent a lot of money superseding all those safety regulations. Yes, the intent is good and well-meaning. However, we know that we can't necessarily, in an elementary classroom, we're not doing 2 meters of distancing. It's not happening. And in kindergarten, we're over that. The space regulations are not what they are in other places. We realize that. We are not under the same regulations as other, well, I don't want to say industries because we're not an industry, as other jurisdictions. So although I understand the intent, I would be wary of saying to go and adopt, like, say, a daycare regulations or something along those lines. We have to, and I think Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan has already said that we are meeting or beating several of those regulations already. And to give an open blanket, I would hope that in Langley we do our best when it comes to this, and we are superseding those things. But to open the bucket and start saying, okay, we're going to reduce classes down to size, 8 per classroom, and all those things to meet some of the space considerations that we're talking about would put us behind a huge financial 8 ball. And so I'm somewhat concerned about that. That may not be the intent, but I do understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate the sentiment, but I can't support that open-endedness.
You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. I have Trustee Ross now, and then I've got Trustee Perot. If anybody else wanted on the list for first-time speakers that has been missed, please just let me know. Then I will speak after. All right, so go ahead, Trustee Ross.
Well, from what Mr. Bunyan said, it seems like it's a rather moot point. We're already doing that. So the intention of the policy, of the motion, pardon me, is already being done. So it sounds like we should actually withdraw this motion, but I guess we own it right now, so we have to do something with it. We can't just let it sit aside or anything like that. So I'm quite willing to support it. I see no downside to supporting it. So for the time being, I can. I hear Trustee Todd, his comments, but I still don't think that going over and above is going to ever get us in a problem if we got the money. Yeah, we're not gonna send a bill for anything we choose to do, but I think the district already, that's part of our culture. So if someone else could, shine a light that I'm not aware of, I'd really I think it's a moot point at this point.
I think, yeah. So Trustee Pro, let's go to you now. You have a question or comment?
I would like to understand, I kind of am in 100% agreement with Trustee Ross, but I have a point of clarification, trying to understand some of the intent, like parameters on it. What are there's got to be parameters, right? Like, I am in complete agreement that, you know, there's no harm in doing better, and especially with this, I have immunocompromised family members, and my kiddos can't see their grandma now that they started back at school. That's just the way it is right now. And so we walk this journey, and each of us are in our own little rowboat doing our thing. But when we're looking at a large scale organism like what we're working with, and the impacts that we're going to experience, not might, we're going to experience some level of impact, and none of us know what it's going to be. What are the parameters? And therefore, if we're saying we're increasing, whatever that means, is there any legal consequences on us as a result of saying we're increasing to A, B, C, and if a school, you know, A didn't achieve that, I'm just trying to understand if there's any consequences that we're not observing to be mindful of when we're moving forward in a conversation like this. This, you know, this is all new, so I'm just rambling on at this point, trying to figure out what could happen.
So, okay, thank you, Trustee Pro. I'd like to just add a point of clarification, because I see that Trustee Coburn also has a question for clarification. The idea of a motion telling staff that it's okay, you can go above and beyond, like a permissive motion, isn't the type of motion a board brings. A board, when it has an action, like it's something that's A, within its domain, and B, is actually something that can be delivered. Otherwise, it's like a proclamation, and boards don't do proclamations. Like, we'll do stuff at the opening, like where we recognize things that are important, but we don't pass motions for proclamations. So my concern is this: the Provincial Health Authority sets up guidelines. For instance, the BC CDC updated its K-12 guidelines, where it removed sneezing and stuffy nose as not being COVID-19, or not is COVID-19, but other respiratory illnesses, because as they said, as the Provincial Health Authority said, in a call that every trustee was invited to and is available online under the BC Hub with Dr. Gustafson just recently, they said that as we've done more and more testing, we've realized that some of these symptoms are not symptoms that are associated with COVID. And that the symptoms that were associated with COVID are actually fever, cough, shortness of breath, and loss of smell. And that's because they've been continuously testing groups, and they've been able to hone in on which ones are symptoms that should be tested. Those are set by the Provincial Health Authority. The Provincial Health Authority, as I said, held a conference call for all trustees explaining the differences on how they treat cohorts and the intent. And it was an opportunity for trustees to ask questions. And as board chair, and I know Trustee Vice Chair Todd, who also attended, asked questions also, I raised the concern that the issue is very serious, that the communication is not taking place in an organized way that instills public confidence, and that the failure of providing that information rests at the hands of both the Ministry of Education and the Provincial Health Authority, and that it is unfair to allow our school system, our community, our families, our teachers, everybody to live in this sort of mixed up message. And the Provincial Health Authority is assured that they're going to take a stronger stand on providing information out. And I have asked, as all trustees here have expressed, we want an opportunity to have a town hall where people can ask questions. What I'm not okay with is passing a motion that is just like this vacuum motion, because to different people it will mean different things. And at this time, we need to be leading with a way of providing the public confidence that's out there. So saying, hey, staff, we as a board, just like we want you to we were giving you permission to exceed things. The inverse. So when you think of emotion, you must always think of the inverse of emotion. The inverse of the motion is that, like, without that, they're not. So I can't support that because our role is leadership and governance. Our superintendent, secretary, treasurer, all of our district leadership team, they take all of this information and put it into action. And as you've heard, they're already exceeding in certain ways. But if we just send this thing out that just says, hey, you know what, we just want you to exceed stuff, that's going to be interpreted very different ways, and that's not good governance, in my opinion. So I won't be supporting that, not because I don't hear your heart and your intent, but just because I just feel as though the motion isn't a motion that's implementable. So I have Trustee Coburn, who has a question for clarification. And then I don't see anybody else on the speakers list. If you'd like to be added, let me know. And then remember, speaking twice. And it's now almost 11, and our staff have been up for days and days and days and haven't had a break over summer, so we got to let them go to bed because they got to come back to work the next day. Trustee Coburn.
Well, I'm going to take like an hour at least, so.
Cool. Okay, let me just send you live.
Trustee Wilson, I'm just trying to get a handle on what it is you're trying to achieve, right? So like, as Chair Dykeman has said, like, communication has been poor from both the government and the provincial health office, and if we're going to do better, then we're going to have really clear communication. So I am myself, like everybody in the province, really confused as to why you can't have 6 people in a room, but you can have 30 kids in a classroom, right? Like, I get it. And I too don't love the way that the responsibility has been downloaded to boards, and then we've had our hands totally tied, and now they're like, release the hounds and do whatever you like, which is then going to put more pressure on us to exceed, because now we can be blamed because the government has given us our autonomy. So we're in a really tough situation. So I'm trying to understand is if you're trying to give individual schools that authority, or if you're looking to put further restrictions or add further safety guidelines, because I myself am not clear on what you're looking for. I understand. I really want to support you in this motion, but I am concerned about just saying, okay, just increase it as you see fit, because there will be some people who will be very responsible with that. There might be some people who won't be. And then are we responsible for granting everybody what they want? And is that going to come back to our superintendent and our staff? Like, well, the board said this. So that's where I'm looking for some clarification. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it totally does. And I am happy to admit that it was a poorly worded motion done at the last minute, because I had a lot of other motions and policies to look through, thinking we would be debating policy tonight. But my intent behind that motion was just like the things that we have discussed here, that when everybody's concerned of why is there only allowed 10 people, but this is safe to have 50 people all in a foyer of a school, yet we're not allowed to say you must wear masks in a classroom of 30, when it's been said that if you can't physically distance, you should be wearing a mask. So I felt like, because we keep hearing all of these different sets of parameters for schools, and now we keep basically being thrown under the bus. I don't want to say it, but saying before you had to follow these, but now we're like, if you don't like it, go to your school board. They're in charge of that now. And so I just really feel like it puts staff in an awkward position to try to come up with any other restrictions that they might find necessary, whether it be staggering an extra lunch break or making other doors for that, or having masks in the classroom, that they feel like they are handcuffed to these K-12 regulations that aren't the same provincial health orders that other sectors have. And so I just felt like, if this is now being placed on boards, that we should let staff know that if they need to put some of those health restrictions in that are there for the other groups, that we're okay with that as a board. You're muted.
Okay, we have a motion. Trustee Perot's called the question. So I see Trustee Perot's called the question. Why is that? Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Trustee Perot has called the question. We would need a seconder to call the question. Seconder to call the question, seconded by David Todd. All those in favor of calling the question? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. So the question's been called, so that means we immediately go to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. All those opposed, please state your opposition in the chat, please. All those in favor, raise your hands. All those opposed, raise your hands one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the motion's defeated. All right, so with that, we have completed our business. We need a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Moved by Trustee Ross. And oh, one last thing. I have one last thing here, which is question period. So question period, due to the use of an online platform for this regular board meeting, the process for question period is as follows. The board will not be taking questions from members of the public in real time, but we encourage members of the public to please submit their questions by emailing feedback@sd35.bc.ca. Questions will be accepted up to 1 hour after the adjournment of the meeting. Board members or the appropriate staff will respond to the individual directly to acknowledge that they've received the email within 24 hours. The following will help the public develop questions for question period at a board meeting that is keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. So questions need to be directed at the chair, not staff. They need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda. They need to be succinct, focused, and not be a statement. They may not be asked if they are related to personnel or directed at an individual trustee. They may not be asked if they are related to contract negotiations. All of the above are directions provided for in Policy 1204. Bylaws of the board. The chair may answer, may defer to staff, or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public's interest to ensure a professional meeting is conducted, with question period focused on providing guests with the clarification they seek. Trustees are also welcome questions from the member of the public apart from question period. Their contact information is available on the school district website. So thank you. There was a request, it's not on the agenda, for a pause for 1 minute of silence, which goes back to the first item on One Shirt. I was going to be reaching out to trustees so that we can tape individual messages for Orange Shirt Day as it falls on September 30th. But if there's no opposition to the trustees, if we could just take 1 minute to be silent. I don't see any opposition. We'll be starting now and we'll end silence at 10:56 or 10:57. Okay, thank you for that request, Trustee Perot, and the opportunity to remember those. So with that, motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Everybody have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.